The main character, happily visiting her parents, told her mother that she had received a scholarship and a holiday payment from the company, so she bought some fruits, which, according to rumors, were very tasty. However, the girl shuddered and looked worriedly at her mother when she indifferently asked what there was to be happy about. The mother, without taking her eyes off the phone, hissed that now all students receive scholarships, and the neighbor's daughter actually received the highest bonus from the company. The door behind the protagonist creaked as the woman told her daughter that if she bought those fruits in that store, her brothers wouldn't eat them. Meanwhile, two guys, the main character's brothers, entered the room and told Mom that they were ready. The girl asked where they were going, and the mother replied that they were going to see their grandmother because she had promised her grandson a gift in honor of his admission to an expensive university. But suddenly, the mother stopped telling her daughter all the details, as she considered that it was none of her business, while the brother kept glaring at his sister. Before leaving her daughter alone, the mother asked her to take her useless fruits with her and leave that place. The main character looked down sadly, but she thinks that everything is fine with her because she has been treated like this since childhood. After these events, she returned to her dorm, walking alone past the cheerful crowd of teenagers. Once in her modest apartment, the girl took a shower and then left the bathroom. She had lived there for a long time, being the unloved child in the family, but recently moved out with great difficulty. After a shower, she plopped down tiredly on the bed. The heroine works in a place that can be combined with studying. She is a 23-year-old student. Suddenly, a new notification comes to the girl's phone, which is lying next to her on the bed, that a new chapter of the novel The Illusion of Adoption has been released. The student was delighted, because this was her favorite novel, where the main character thought that she was lucky with her adoptive parents. But this turned out to be an illusion. The girl really enjoys reading new chapters of this novel, which come out every night. This is her only joy. In The Illusion of Adoption, everyone loves the main character, both the father and the friends. And for someone, it is just an ordinary novel about a child, which helps to have fun. But for a student, on a gloomy day like today, it becomes a priceless piece of work that gives comfort. Clutching the phone in her hand, the main character wondered why everyone hated her. The girl, falling asleep, dropped the phone, thinking how good it would be if there was a world where she was loved, because she also madly wanted it. With these thoughts, the student fell asleep, and when she opened her eyes, she suddenly found herself in the body of a little girl with cute pink hair. Looking around the room she found herself in, the heroine immediately realized that she had been transported to another world, since she had been reading romantic fantasy for many years. Then, the adult girl in the baby's body looked around the entire palace, which had many elements with a black dragon. Having analyzed everything, the girl realized that there could be no mistake, and she had definitely entered the world of the novel The Illusion of Adoption. And the palace in which she deigned to wake up belongs to the Etam clan, also known as the Dragon Clan. One of their ancestors, the head of the Berthad Etam clan, thanks to the seal of the Black Dragon, drank its blood and made a contract that gave the entire clan enormous power. However, as a side effect, whenever mana stagnates, the impulse to kill appears, and the chronic disease of unmanhood is also passed on through inheritance. To calm this down, the main character, who has the power of purification and also a thirst for justice, becomes the salvation from worries for the Etam family. This girl with a sunny character can only be called an impeccable protagonist, and the student, having read The Illusion of Adoption, believes that if she appeared in this world, then, of course, she moved into the body of the main character. Looking at the outer walls of the palace, the girl is glad that she has found herself in the world of a novel, so she can enjoy a carefree life here. Looking at her reflection in the glass, the little girl proudly reasons that her life will now be as sweet and bright as her soft pink hair. But suddenly, she notices one detail. Her hair is indeed pink, but the main character of the novel has a completely different color, black, which is blacker than the night. The protagonist stared at her reflection in bewilderment, not understanding who she had been reborn as. Erin Etham is an illegitimate child of a sideline, expelled from the family for hooliganism. But thanks to her noble ancestors, she managed to remain in the family. But one New Year's Eve, an incident happened to 5-year-old Oren, which led to suspicions about her origins, and as a result, she was kicked out of the family. The maid handed the girl a cup of aromatic cocoa decorated with marshmallows. Taking a sharp sip of the hot drink, the little girl sadly thought about why she was reborn into an extra novella and why she was not the main character. Erin fell silent, and the maid, thinking that she might have been burned, ran excitedly to her and asked if she was all right. Sitting down next to the young lady, the servant suggested that she let the cocoa cool and eat some cookies first. But suddenly, the girl, raising her eyes to the servant, exclaimed that it was incredibly delicious, then asked how she prepared it. The maid said it was called hot chocolate, and that the main family was short of hands, so she had to go there and bring it back from there. The girl said that she prepared this drink with great care, so she is glad that she liked it. Her name is Mila. She is Iron's personal maid. Even before the young lady moved to the palace, the maid always took care of her. She teaches the little one the wisdom of this world, completely unfamiliar to her. She believes in her and helps her, like a real older sister. Erin, happily wagging her legs and sipping delicious hot chocolate, asked the maid if it was true that they had some kind of holiday today. But suddenly, the girl choked when Mela answered that tomorrow was the New Year's celebration. She was upset because she remembered that tomorrow was the very day when she would be kicked out of the palace. The little girl thought about how sad it was to be an extra, then realized that she simply didn't have time to sit here any longer. Erin ran as fast as she could, shouting to the surprised maid that she was heading to the study and asking her to bring the remaining hot chocolate to her room. Walking quickly along the spacious corridors, the girl thinks that first she needs to find a new home for herself. The young lady decided that she needed to choose the best orphanage from those on the list, so she headed to the library. Opening the door to the office, the girl remembers that there was supposedly an orphanage run by a retired hero of the Great War with demons. But suddenly, Erin froze and stared ahead, because she caught herself thinking that she couldn't remember. She was very surprised by this, because she read this novel every day, and it couldn't be that she didn't remember something. Suddenly, the little girl, finding herself in the library, came across a young guy in rich clothes who was intently looking at a book. His hair was so beautiful that it seemed to have absorbed all the darkness of this world, and his golden eyes sparkled as if honey was splashing in them. Erno Etham is the last contender for the place of the heir of the Ethan family. The guy seems to be created by a heavenly deity. The main character, having seen such beauty that is impossible to forget, realized that thanks to him she remembers the whole novel, but she wondered what he was doing here, in the backyard. Suddenly, Erno, looking at the little girl with a thin smile, asked her if she by any chance knew where the books on sacred magic were. But at that moment, Erin simply fell into a stupor and, with her mouth open, stared at the gentleman. Erno turned away from her and focused on the book again, and the girl shuddered in fear because she didn't have time to answer, as she was staring at his beauty. But the next moment, the little girl answered, in a sweet, flirtatious voice, that they were on the second shelf of the first rack. The young man turned his gaze to the child again, without saying a word. The girl decided to walk on about her business, because she decided that he didn't like flirting, judging by his imperturbable appearance, but he began to follow her. But suddenly, she stopped in front of one of the shelves, thinking that the book she needed might be right there. As she flips through the pages of the book, she remembers that she needs an orphanage for the heroine of the Great Demon War. The little girl was very happy when she found the necessary information and did not even notice Erno, who almost imperceptibly sat down next to her and also stared at the book. But, noticing the guy, she got very scared, and he, getting to his feet, said that thanks to her he found the right book, and that this library is quite spacious, but it seems that she knows her way around it well. Erno asked the girl what she was reading, but she suddenly became worried, thinking that this was a trap question, which she was sure of, since she had been reading novels for many years. As she was about to speak, the girl thought that she would be kicked out of the palace tomorrow anyway, and she couldn't get caught doing that. She smiled broadly and said cheerfully that she was simply learning to read letters. The young lady said that she did not understand the meaning, but she was still interested, to which the young gentleman smiled and expressed his surprise. The girl fell silent, and the tall, proud gentleman walked away in the other direction. As soon as His Highness left, the protagonist felt very strange. At one point, the little girl dropped the book from her hands and seemed to evaporate into thin air. Only her clothes and accessories remained in the air. The reason why Erin's origins are suspected, and why she knows she is not of the Etam lineage, is because she is a lizard person. She can't control her transformation, so in the original novel, she turned right at the New Year's celebration, where the whole family had gathered. Surprised that she could be kicked out a day earlier, the little girl thought about how to return her previous appearance. But until she could transform, she would hide behind the shelves, so she dragged her clothes there. Thinking that it couldn't be, that it was completely impossible to return to human form, the girl noticed an expensive ring on the floor. Grabbing it with her little paws, Erin was very surprised and wondered who had lost such a beautiful and luxurious ring. But then the girl realized that it seemed familiar to her and remembered that this ring was worn by the same Erno with whom she was in the library. Suddenly, the little pink lizard heard a strange sound nearby, which made her shudder in fear. It turned out to be His Highness, who, as if nothing had happened, was walking between the shelves. As soon as the young gentleman went behind the shelf where his little friend was located, instead of her, he saw something rustling under the blue fabric. The guy remained standing in place and looking at this creature, while the lizard girl, frightened by his appearance, crawled away from him. Still, the werewolf did not manage to crawl far on his little legs, and Erno, coming closer to Erin, bent down to her, causing her to shudder in fear. As soon as the descendant of the Etam clan lifted the blue cloth from the creature, he grinned at the person he saw underneath it. He saw the smiling, but in fact terribly frightened main character, and asked her what game she was playing. She, smiling cheerfully, said that she was picking up a ring that she found on the floor. Erin thought about how she had almost been caught, and that she had been saved by hiding among her clothes, and that she had been able to return to her human form so quickly, and now she had to act calmly. Erno asked the little girl if she was accidentally talking about his ring, to which she replied that she was, and that it had rolled behind the shelf, but she had pulled it out. The girl added that she had wiped it well, and His Highness, looking at the sparkling decoration, said that she had done a good job. The gentleman said that this ring was very important to him, so he hurried back, but she was looking for it so hard that she even turned over in her skirt. The guy thanked the girl, stroking her head. She giggled, but felt wildly tired, which is why she decided to quickly go to her room. The time had come to give the ring to its owner, and the heroine wanted to do it in such a way as not to touch Erno's hands, because she realized that he did not like touching. The little girl did it perfectly. With her small hands, she simply dropped the jewelry right into the man's large palm. Suddenly, the jewel in the gentleman's hand began to glow, and he, thoughtfully pursing his lips, watched this. At that moment, something inexplicable happened to His Highness, causing him to stare in front of him with his mouth open in shock. The little girl, who was irritated by the young man's long silence, said that she would probably go. Erin rushed away, and his lordship, without uttering a word, rose to his feet. Erno, a sly smile appearing on his face, glanced towards the girl and said that this was all quite interesting. The next day came, and the main character came to the main reception hall in the main palace of the Etam clan, which was striking in its luxury. The young lady, dressed in a cute purple dress, looks around and is amazed that the entire Etam clan has actually gathered in this hall. But suddenly, the girl, looking at the crowds of people in the hall, involuntarily thought about how scared Erin was when she turned into a lizard in front of their eyes. Then the little girl realized that this story could now possibly happen to her too. However, she had nothing to worry about. She had learned the location of the shelter she was looking for, and had also wandered around the castle at night, collecting capital for an emergency. Smiling, the lady thought that, of course, it would be better if she didn't turn into a lizard at all. But even if she did, she would simply take her savings and go to an orphanage. But while the child was immersed in his thoughts, 2 guards at the entrance to the throne began their speech. They announced the ceremonial exit of the 12th dragon, who protects the empire, after which several pairs of legs headed towards the throne. Then 4 people came out towards the throne at once: the father, Duke Mirel Etam, his son, and 2 very young boys. The 12th head of the Etam family is a bearded man with a murderous look. He, having appeared before the family, proposed to start a meeting on the occasion of the new year. Miral Etem's son, Erno Etem, stood next to his father and looked at those present with a slight smile. On the other side of the head of the family were Erno's sons, Callan and Cillian Etham. One of them found what was happening incredibly boring. Looking at this family, the main character realized that this is them. It is they, among all the Etams, who have the richest dragon blood. Erin was surprised that their mere appearance filled the room with an atmosphere of great power, when she suddenly noticed something special. The little girl saw that Erno himself was waving his hand at her in a friendly manner, but the excited lady refused to believe that he was looking at her. But she became convinced that he was waving specifically at her when she heard people whispering behind her back that the gentleman had greeted some girl. The child thought she should say hello to him before more eyes were directed at her, so she waved her hand shyly and smiled. The young gentleman, seeing the girl's gesture, for some reason stared at her in surprise and felt his heart tremble. He put his hand to his chest in bewilderment, while the head butler, unfolding a huge list in front of him, asked for the first name. Mr. Millen's name was called out in the room, and he was asked to step forward, which he did, coughing awkwardly. The man, smiling sheepishly, looked at his lordship and greeted him. He then said that he was planning to begin a new study. The main character, watching this, remembers that the new year in the Etam ducal family begins with all its people gathering together and announcing their plans for the coming year. While the head of the family was reading Millen's reports, the gentleman himself said that new plants had recently been found on the eastern continent. The man added that these plants help to calm the soul and body thanks to their smell, but his lordship suddenly ordered him to be silent. Millen shut up and sweated, and Morel asked him menacingly if he had even read the basic research. Throwing Millen's reports at him, the head of the family declared that he had decided to investigate a plant that had already been fully studied, then asked what the hell. But then the old man, frowning, said, "What can someone know who launders money allocated for research in an expensive bar?" Morel added that he had heard that he was insulting women there and had also taken out debts in the name of his family, to which he shouted in fear that this was not so. The head of the family's gaze became even more frightening, and he ordered the man to tell him which of this was not true. Millen trembled with fear like an aspen leaf when the master asked what reason would allow him to be left alive when he was such a disgrace to his name. The man could not find a single argument in his favor, which is why he fell powerlessly to the floor, desperately asking for forgiveness. Aaron smiled sheepishly, thinking that the New Year's gathering in the Etam family was actually aimed at bringing to the surface the sins that everyone had committed this year. The girl recalls that when she read the novel, she felt that Duke Morel really cared about his family, scolding everyone and everything. However, the young lady was terrified by the fact that she, too, would have to come out to him and tell him about her successes. But at that very second, the little girl breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that there were a lot of people in the family, and it would definitely not be her turn. But her expectations were not met, and after some time, the heroine herself found herself in front of his lordship, looking at him with huge, frightened eyes. Morel, looking at her, wondered what kind of fluffy thing she was. The boys were surprised at how small she was, and Erno whispered to his father that he needed to tell her her name. The old man, almost accidentally calling Erin Fluffy, said her name and asked what her plans were for the new year. The little girl, whose head was already spinning from worry, joked to herself that her plan was to go to an orphanage, and a very good one at that. The poor kid thought that it would be better to turn into a lizard right now, but it hardly works that way. The girl, overcoming her shyness, admitted that she wanted to leave home safely. The head of the Etam family, hearing this, stared at the young lady with surprised eyes. And the main character began to hear people whispering loudly behind her. His lordship asked her if she wanted to leave the house, to which she said yes. Then the old man asked why. Even though the heroine's inner voice told her that it was time to stop talking this nonsense, Erin still admitted that she had learned the secret of her origin. Suddenly, Morel asked what secret she was talking about, and the girl, shuddering fearfully, asked him again. The little girl closed her eyes, trying to gather her strength, because she had to explain everything, but she had never been very good at this. In her previous life, when she was studying, she was bad at giving presentations. But as soon as the protagonist tried to speak, a security guard suddenly burst into the room and loudly announced that a disaster had occurred. The old man asked what had happened, and the servant told him that the mines of the floating stones had just collapsed, and several miners and the manager were trapped. The head of the family was stunned when he heard this, and asked if there were any casualties, to which the guard said that there were no casualties, but several miners were injured. Morel, clutching his head in irritation, mumbled how they ensured security there. Suddenly, his lordship's gaze turned to Aaron, who was still standing in front of him, not knowing where to hide from fear and awkwardness. He, leaving his throne, announced that they would hold the New Year's meeting again in a few days, and ordered everyone to remain in the castle. The head of the family hurried to leave the hall, but suddenly his gaze again stopped on the crowd. He pointed his finger at 3 specific men who flinched in fear. The old man, having warned that he would not talk much, ordered these people to obediently polish their necks until they shined and follow him. They wanted to object, but Morel, taking out his incredibly sharp sword, asked if he should rub his necks with it himself, after which the men obeyed. Unable to hold back their tears, the offenders took out their handkerchiefs and began to carry out the order, while the little girl watched them. But suddenly, his lordship loudly called out to the main character, and she asked in fear what was going on. The girl, thinking that the same fate awaited her, lowered her gaze and, stammering with fear, admitted that she did not have a headscarf. The little girl was so upset that she burst into tears throughout the entire room, screaming that she didn't have it. The Etam family members watched the crying child with tenderness and pity. Wiping away her tears, Aaron thought that the old man was probably angry with her, and she couldn't just cry like that now. Deciding to get out of the awkward situation, the girl turned to the nearest man and asked him if he could by chance give her a handkerchief, adding that even a used one would do. The ladies, open-mouthed at how sweet the young lady was when she cried, said they had a handkerchief too, and the gentleman said he would give it to her. The young man handed the young lady his used handkerchief with hearts on it. A small child's hand reached out for the handkerchief, thanking the man for his help. But suddenly, a man appeared next to the protagonist and snatched him from the hands of a family member. Mirel, coughing in embarrassment, asked the girl when he had asked her to rub his neck, and he had only wanted to order her to put her thoughts in order. The surprised heroine asked if she would die, to which he replied that a fluff like her was not fit to become hay. Iron, thinking about how those people were connected to the hay that the gentleman was talking about, was involuntarily horrified. She, calling Morel grandfather, asked where those men were going, but he only irritably said that it was better for her not to know about it. But suddenly, the head of the family turned to the little girl and asked her what she had just said, to which she asked what exactly. The little girl realized that he was referring to the very moment she called him grandpa, without realizing it, and now he is angry with her because of it. Thinking that she would die because of this, the girl decided to smile, hoping to soften her punishment, and again called the head of the family grandfather. Morel, hearing this, stared at the main character with surprised eyes. He asked the child to repeat, and when she called him that again, the old man suddenly shuddered. The girl thought that his lordship did not want to be called that, so she tried chief. But the man suddenly turned around sharply and asked Aaron to stop, calling her Little Fluff. As he walked away from the little girl, he told her that he would check everything thoroughly at the next meeting, so he asked her to check everything properly. The main character, looking after him, wondered whether he would really kill her or not, and whether this was a death warning. This meeting ended quickly, and after that, the protagonist went out into the garden, where she sat down on a bench. The young lady thought about the fact that she was trying to find a way to escape, but she did not see any suitable place. Moreover, she thinks about yesterday all the time and regrets that she said this nonsense about wanting to leave home. But suddenly, a small object hits the girl's head and bounces off to the side. When the child wanted to see what it was, she discovered that it was a paper ball. Aaron thought that it had somehow accidentally been blown there by the wind, but then another object flies towards the girl, which, if she had not managed to dodge in time, would have hit her on the head. While the girl was irritably looking for someone who could have thrown the ball at her, several boys nearby were giggling cheerfully. One of the hooligans mockingly asked Aaron why she was here alone and whether she really had no home or friends. The main character stared at them in bewilderment, not knowing how to react. The boy told the little girl that she need not worry, because they would play with her, in return asking her to return the ball that had just hit her. The little girl decided to just ignore it, but she became wary when the bully shouted that she didn't know this because she hadn't been properly trained. The boy's friend asked if it was true that she had not been taught, to which he mockingly replied that it was true since she had no parents. While the hooligans were chatting about their own things, the protagonist glanced at the huge stone that lay nearby on the ground. The bully's friend said that his mother had forbidden him to play with children without their parents. But he, sitting down on the fountain like he owned the place, told him that the girl was just a fool, so they would play with her for fun. One of the bullies laughed at the fact that Erin had no parents, no home, no friends, and asked if she had anything at all. Another boy joked about the heroine's secret origin and nearly died laughing. But suddenly, what the young man saw in front of him made him instantly stop laughing, and on the contrary, become wary. He excitedly asked his friend to turn around, and he, not understanding what was going on, did as he was told. Behind him was Erin, who, drilling him with a withering gaze, swung a huge boulder straight at him. Only at the last moment the boy managed to dodge. The stone fell a few centimeters from him. He suddenly shouted that he would tell his mother everything, but the heroine, rolling up her sleeves, said that let him tell, and that it would be better for her to remain without parents than to be with them and become like them. The main bully, gritting his teeth, called Erin an impudent girl, and his friend, putting his hand on his shoulder, asked him to stop and just leave. But suddenly, the protagonist froze when the hooligans started talking about how it was not for nothing that they said about people like her that you never know what to expect from them. But as soon as the girl picked up the stone again and shouted that they couldn't even learn the phrase compensation for damages, they immediately ran away. Having gotten rid of the offenders, the little girl tiredly threw the stone on the ground and sighed. The main character remembered her past life. Her younger brothers always asked her why she looked like that, because they were ashamed of her. The brothers told their sister with disgust that she walked around school in ugly clothes, and that because of this, they could not look their friends in the face. Also, one day as a child, Erin accidentally overheard a conversation between her mother and grandmother from an open door, where she talks about how housing prices keep rising and they need more money from her. The mother tells the grandmother on the phone that Ito and Ihyun are fine because she bought them a house in Gangnam for the arrival of grandchildren. Mom promises to send her 2 sons, both of them, to Daejeon, but she needs to think about her daughter Miso because she will most likely be sent to a dormitory. The heroine believes that it is not for nothing that fairy tales about the ugly duckling in the family appear. They arise because those who have power begin to despise the weak. The girl recalls that her father ignored her, and her younger brothers also thought that she could be ignored, although in truth, the whole family ignored her. The second chicken leg always went to her brothers, and all the problems were blamed on her, which made the little girl feel very lonely. The same thing happened during arguments. Miso was always the one to blame, but suddenly the girl is pulled out of her thoughts by a sudden sound that sounded nearby, namely meowing. Under her feet, the protagonist saw a cute cat with white fur, who, looking into her face, did not stop meowing. Erin was pleasantly surprised by her appearance and asked the animal if she would be friends with her. The girl stroked the kitty's head and said that she would just talk to her sometimes. Then she asked her new friend if she often came here. The young lady thought that even though she had yelled at those hooligans, what if they really came to demand compensation and complain about her? Continuing to cuddle with the cat, the girl asked her if she would live with her, but she only purred in response. However, Erin was taken aback when the cat suddenly turned away from her. At that very moment, the beast ran into the bushes, and the protagonist only managed to desperately call out to her. Thinking that she had been abandoned again, just like her previous family, the little girl looked down sadly. Suddenly, the girl saw that the same cat had returned to her with a bunch of her kittens. The heroine was very surprised when she saw that her friend had a family. Erin, seeing how sweetly the mother cat interacts with her babies, expressed surprise at how close they all are. But suddenly, the little girl became sad, because the same cannot be said about her family. One of the kittens, as if sensing that the girl was sad, teased her boot with its paw. Thanks to this, the protagonist felt a little better and smiled to herself. Erin decided to go to Mela and eat pudding. Having said goodbye to the kitties, the little girl walked into the palace, not noticing that someone was watching her from the window. Erno Etam, watching the child with a smile, is amazed at how funny she is, remembering the look on her face when the bullies told her that she had not been properly trained. The young man thought she would cry at that moment. However, the gentleman certainly did not expect that she would take a huge boulder and start to disperse the bandits with it. Without taking his eyes off the girl, the man thinks that he found it surprising that she was looking at information about the orphanage in the library. Because usually the descendants of Etam are proud of their origin, so it is difficult to even imagine that an illegitimate girl from a side branch would suddenly decide to renounce her noble family and leave home. However, everything would have ended if she had not picked up the ring that he had deliberately dropped next to her in the library. Erno didn't expect anything, but was slightly surprised when the little girl handed him his ring and with a beaming smile said that she had found it and cleaned it well. The man was even more surprised when after this the ring in his hand began to emit energy that definitely meant something. The young gentleman chuckled slyly, his ears amazed that despite her ability, Erin still decided to leave home. The heroine continued to sadly trudge home, and Erno thought that since he was curious about something, he should reward her. The ring on His Highness's hand flashed as he said that he needed to punish the boys who had not been properly taught how to behave. Soon it was time to continue that very meeting. The main character came out to his lordship, since last time everything stopped with her. Morel asked the little one to name the reason why she wanted to leave, and she shyly spoke about how it was her secret origin. Suddenly, the girl noticed that the crowd of people had grown larger, as if they had gathered together to watch the next episode of their favorite TV series. But Iron knows that everything will be fine, because she has already prepared everything to leave home. The little girl was about to speak fearfully about who she really was, but suddenly a voice was heard behind her, which said that she was actually his daughter, which the excited girl repeated. But suddenly, the heroine came to her senses and thought about what she had just said, while the tall figure had just caught up with her. It was Erno who, looking warmly at the child, said that she needed to say it properly, namely that he was her daddy. The main character, smiling from embarrassment and fear, apologized to the gentleman, but wondered if she would be able to see the sun tomorrow if she said so. The protagonist remembers that Erno Ithim from the novel is a terrible hedonist. He never does anything that does not bring him pleasure. And until now, this man did everything he wanted and got everything he wanted. And later, when he had played enough, he always broke the toys so that no one else could take them and play with them. So Iron realizes that if she wants a quiet life, she needs to avoid him, because she will become another toy that he will break. But when she saw that the young gentleman was looking her straight in the eye and smiling, she embarrassedly realized that it seemed that she had already caught his eye. There was a deathly silence in the hall for a long time, but the old man broke it by shouting to his son that now was not the time for such jokes and that he had better step aside. Erno, smiling sweetly, said that he spoke very interestingly and asked if he had ever left after waiting his turn. Morel got even angrier when Erno asked if the line was important when he just wanted to see his daughter. But the girl got nervous at that moment because she wasn't really his daughter. Looking at His Highness from under her forehead, the little girl wondered why he decided to joke like that, because she had to reveal her secret and leave. However, Aaron really doesn't want to get involved between Morel and Erno, because their argument is like a battle between two animals. But suddenly, the protagonist's heart almost stopped when Mr. Itam suggested that the old man ask his daughter directly if he didn't believe him. His Highness whispered to the child that as people get older, they become more suspicious, and so did his father. The head of the clan angrily asked who among them was suspicious. The girl was surprised by the young man's words, because he was the first to lie that she was his daughter. But Erno suggested that she tell her grandfather herself who he was to her. The heroine became very nervous and mumbled something unintelligible, not daring to do it for a long time. But she still happily declared that this man was her daddy and pointed her hands at Erno, who praised her, stroking her head. The old man ordered this to stop and shouted at his son that he had never behaved quietly during the meeting, and now he decided to drag other people's children into every meeting. At this point, the crowd began to whisper that this year he wanted to adopt Aaron. although last year he adopted a boy who was kicked out after 4 months. People began to argue about how long the main character would last in the role of Mr. Erno's daughter, 6 months or no more than 4 months. This upset the little girl because they were already used to having fun like this. The little lady realizes that this is not surprising, because in the novel, Erno used people like chess pieces and easily got rid of them. But suddenly, the protagonist hears a rumor that when Erno has played with her enough, he will give her money that can be used to buy a small island. The girl was very stunned by this, because it was incredibly cool, although those gossips talked about it as if it was bad. The heroine realizes that if she plays along with Erno for just 6 months, then she will spend the rest of her life having carefree fun on her own island. Erin had no idea that things could turn out so badly for her, so she clenched her fist and looked hopefully into the man's face. While the descendant of Etam was telling the leader that if he was dissatisfied with something, he could change the air, he noticed the child's intent gaze on himself. Smiling warmly at the girl, he extended his hands towards her, which made her wary. Deftly lifting the baby into his arms, Erno declared that his goal for the year was to become a wonderful father to the daughter with whom he had been reunited so belatedly. The head of the clan shouted angrily that he would never make a father, since he was a worthless son too. But Aaron interrupted his father, saying that if he yelled so loudly, he would scare his daughter, to which the heroine embarrassedly thought that he was talking about her. The little girl said that it was nothing to worry about, and that she was not afraid of her grandfather, to which the young gentleman asked if she was afraid because her daddy was protecting her. But suddenly, the face of the head of the family and his grandchildren twisted in surprise when the girl exclaimed that she really wasn't scared, and besides, her grandfather was really cool. Tears appeared in the big amber eyes of the fluffy one, and she, pressing her small fist to her chest, sadly asked Morel not to be angry. The old man was momentarily silent from shock, but then suddenly asked who was angry here, stating that he was not angry at all. However, the two brothers behind him were whispering that their grandfather was still angry, and they were right. At one point, the head of the Etam family rose from his throne, saying that he could not take it anymore. Having humbled his son and the main character with a frown, he ordered them to write down their plans and send them to him, and with that, he would end the New Year's meeting. After that, Mireille hurried away, muttering under her breath about who was still angry here, while Cillian asked his grandfather to be patient. Meanwhile, Erno, looking at the little girl, said that it was time for them to go too. She, staring at him with her large eyes in bewilderment, agreed. Tom walked down the hallway. The New Year's meeting that seemed endless to the protagonist had finally ended, and after it, she became his false daughter. But Erin's panic did not subside, because she did not understand how much longer Erno would carry her, especially since, as she remembered, he hated touching. In truth, the heroine thought that as soon as they left the reception hall, he would immediately throw her out somewhere. But now the gentleman, on the contrary, tries to carry her so that she doesn't shake too much, as if she is really dear to him. However, the little girl is sure that this is why everyone was clinging to him, and for him, she is just a new toy. She's an extra who just needs to behave herself, and when the game is over, just take the money and leave. The heroine decided that she needed to carve into her soul who she was, because in order to avoid mental wounds, one must not hope for anything. Erin buried her face in Erno's shoulder, repeating to herself that she would not hope for anything. But a poisonous smile appeared on the face of the heir of Etam when he felt this. Bright morning light flooded the luxurious room, where little Erin was sleeping on a huge, beautiful bed, with her new dad sitting next to her. The man smiled, and calling the girl his daughter, greeted her. He stroked the little girl's head, who, still half asleep and not understanding anything, wished him good morning. The girl was surprised that her father came to her this time too, and today he was still such a handsome man. A whole week passed after that hellish New Year's meeting, and on that day, Erno took the heroine to his castle and showed her his room, as if it had been prepared in advance. The little girl had not yet found the strength to open her eyes, and yawned non-stop, while Erno said that since she was already awake, it was time to have breakfast. The young man placed a tray in front of the child and said that he had prepared some light soup and bread for her today, which Erin thought was too much. The protagonist wondered why he was feeding her himself, since her true 23-year-old soul was indignant, but the food was really delicious. The gentleman asked with a smile if she wanted to get something from her this time too. Erin, snacking on her bread, thought about the fact that he asked the same thing every day, and it seemed like he really liked giving gifts. The girl thought that she liked money, that it was too Philistine, so she decided to ask for something, pretending that she could not fight herself. Putting the food aside, the main character began talking about how she would like to have her own account. The man asked if she meant a bank account, and she nodded happily. Erin remembers that in this world, the concept of a bank account is a little different from the usual one. The banking system is controlled by a magical tower. No one creates a savings book for the account owner. Instead, they give him the safest safe in the world, protected by triple magic and a perfect shield, which only the owner can penetrate. To the little girl, Erno acts as if he is ready to buy her everything, but in her past life, she already had a family with fake care that was up to her neck. The gentleman asked if he could just give her money, but she thought that he was only pretending to care, since he hadn't even entered her in the family book. However, the heroine doesn't care about this. She doesn't ask him about anything either. The girl happily said that she really wants to save a lot of money. Erin thinks it's just a show. Erno is an exemplary dad who dotes on his daughter, and a sweet extra who always listens to him. There is only one role for her, in which she must ask for nothing, deny nothing, and hope for nothing. Only wait for the day when she is thrown out. The young heir was thinking about something, and she was looking at him with a pleading gaze, because without her safe, she would instantly lose all her wealth. But as soon as Erno removed his hand from his face, a sly smile appeared, and the man said that it seemed that his little daughter was only thinking about running away. The heroine asked him again in surprise, and His Highness, rising to his feet, said that making a bill was not a difficult matter. He extended his hand to the little girl and smiled sweetly, inviting her to go with him since they had started talking about it. After some time, the father and daughter came to a busy city street. The protagonist, dressed in the cutest burgundy dress, did not hide her great admiration for what she saw. Looking around in amazement, she is surprised that she has stepped outside the castle for the first time, and that she ended up on the very same shopping street from the novel. Erno said with a smile that she liked it more than he expected. Then, pointing his finger at a store off to the side, said that there was a toy store there and suggested that they go in there. But the little girl waved her hands and began to say that she didn't need to go there, because she had never played with toys, and counting was enough for her. In fact, the heroine doesn't even know if it's fun to play with them, because in her past life, her parents didn't buy them for her, because they didn't care about her. But suddenly, the father, having looked at his daughter for a few seconds, abruptly took her in his arms with a wide-open smile. Erin didn't even have time to understand anything when Erno, having reached the toy store with her in his arms, grandly opened the doors of the shop. While the workers were running around in bewilderment, the gentleman, having let the child go, said that his daughter was very smart, but completely without desires, which worried him greatly. The store manager wanted to ask His Highness what kind of commotion he was causing here, but he saw him start rummaging through his pockets. Erno asked the man if he was the owner of this shop, and when he answered that he was, and asked what happened, the heir threw a small bag in his direction. The young gentleman, with his trademark smile on his face, said that there were 50 gold pieces in there, and he was asking to be given all the toys he had. The store owner's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when he saw so much money, and the main character immediately flared up when she heard her father's demand. The little girl told the heir that she didn't need the toys, but he said that in that case she could throw them away later. After that, the girl thought about it, but was embarrassed, because she wasn't little after all. As soon as Erno said that he should have just bought the whole store, his daughter quickly ran off to choose, and the shop owner's heart skipped a beat. The heroine remembers that there is magic in this world, so there are many amazing toys around, and some of them are so wonderful that you won't know what they can do until you touch them. But the girl doesn't believe that her father paid 50 gold pieces for this. Suddenly, Erno's voice was heard, again offering to buy the entire store, and Erin anxiously hurried forward, when suddenly her gaze caught something. The girl was so captivated by this particular toy that she decided to choose it. Soon the little girl returned to her dad, who was busy talking with the smiling owner of the store, and shouted to him that she had already chosen what she wanted. Erno, sitting down next to the child, asked in surprise why she took only one toy and whether she would get tired of it, to which she said no way, looking puzzled at his daughter's choice. A black and gray tiger. The man asked why that one, and the girl replied that it looked a lot like her daddy. Smiling genuinely happily, Erin hugged her gift and said that she liked it the best of all. Erno raised his eyebrows at this, and the store workers' mouths dropped open in incredible cuteness. Itam said that in that case, nothing could be done, since his daughter even preferred a toy that looked like him. The heroine already thought that he agreed to stop there, but suddenly, the gentleman asked the shop owner how many of these toys he had left, to which he pointed to a whole stand with them. His Highness asked if anyone else had bought them before, and when he said no, because they were brand new, he snapped his fingers. At the same moment, the toy stand behind the shop owner catches fire. The man panicked as his promising new product burned, while the heir Itam watched everything with a smile. The old man clutched his head, wondering how this could have happened, and his lordship rummaged in his pockets. The shop owner ordered the workers to immediately bring water, when suddenly another bag of coins flies into his hands, and the master asks him not to make a noise. As if nothing had happened, the heir of Itam left the shop, telling the owner of the store that the fire would stop as soon as all the toys were incinerated. The young man also hinted that it would be better for them not to sell such toys anymore, at least because he was generous with them. Indeed, as soon as the store owner opened the second bag, he saw a huge pile of money, even bigger than the previous one. Ignoring the fire blazing behind them, all the shop workers came out to bow to the departing gentleman and thank him for everything. Erno, smiling at Erin, said that now his daughter would have a toy that looked like him, only one of a kind. He asked the little girl if she was happy, to which she, trying to calm her shock, replied that she was. Placing a colorful and delicious pudding in front of his daughter, Erno asked her to open her mouth and say, "Ah!" The little girl obeyed, and at that very second received a spoonful of delicious dessert. The young gentleman asked her if she liked it, to which she replied that she did very much so. The girl thought that the taste was quite good, but she didn't understand why she had to eat here like that, in the presence of her angry grandfather. The Itam clan has a tradition of holding regular meetings twice a week. The family owns many businesses, including the largest, the military. Business issues are discussed at meetings, and all members of the first line of the family must participate. Morale is terribly strict at these meetings, so even one wrong breath can be fatal. But today, the head of the family has a worthy opponent. He slammed his fist on the table, shouted his son's name, and asked what he was doing. His Highness asked with a smile why he was angry, since he had come to the meeting even though it was his daughter's afternoon snack time. The heroine realized that at this rate the Duke would hate her faster than her daddy could throw her out, so she told him that she would not eat the pudding. Clenching her little fists, the little girl said that she would not be a bad girl, but would be a good one, and asked him not to scold her dad. The old man looked at the child in surprise and said that she was just a little fluff, but she spoke so smoothly. With a heavy sigh, the Duke told the girl that it was not her fault, and that he did not care whether she ate 10 puddings or 20. Then, Erno decided to continue feeding his daughter dessert, which made the grandfather angry again and decided that his son was the biggest problem. The protagonist has no idea if she is doing the right thing, but she still decides to continue eating the sweets that her dad was feeding her with a spoon. The little girl liked the taste of the dessert so much that she smiled while chewing it. The others present at the meeting couldn't help but be moved by how cute Erin looked. Even Morel blushed when he looked at her. Still, the old man decided to continue the meeting and asked how things were going with the weapons they were planning to export to Kratov. But everyone at the table was staring only at little Iron. A family member reported that orders were piling up, but materials were in short supply. At this time, one woman was busy looking at the baby, which Erno noticed. Suddenly, the unsuspecting girl felt her father sharply grab her by the shoulder. The heroine simply smiled, and the young gentleman looked so frightening that everyone present began to sweat. The family members stopped staring at the child, and Erno continued feeding his daughter pudding. The meeting turned to the mines with floating stones. Suddenly, the protagonist began to delve into the topic of conversation because she heard that the quality of these stones was getting worse and worse and that they were searching for new mines. Aaron recalls that floating stones are one of the most important materials in this novel, and, as the title suggests, they literally float above the ground. Particularly important was the decisive moment when the main character discovered the entrance that connected to the mine of floating stones, and she found this path right in the mountains in the Etam family's domain, where the baby is now. The question arises as to why the mine with the floating stones was destined to end up there, and all because the main character received all the luck of the novel at once. But now everything is different, because our Erin knows everything that happened in her favorite novel. Besides, she believes that she must have at least one way to prepare for Erno's whims in order to save herself. Clenching her fists nervously, the fluffy one mentally apologized to the main character, who had yet to appear, because she would take this opportunity for herself. She casually asked her daddy what the floating stones everyone was talking about were, creating an image using magic. Erno said that these were useless stones that flew through the sky and lightened the weight of weapons when mixed with steel. Little Aaron was very surprised by this, but the real 23-year-old Miso thought that he was wrong to call them useless, because soon they would become the thing that would change the course of the war and cause a revolution. But everyone present was very surprised when the girl, when asked why she was asking, answered that she saw pebbles flying. Morel, hearing this, slammed his fist on the table again with incredible force. The blow was so powerful that it split the stone table in two, and the family members sitting at it jumped back. Frowning menacingly, the grandfather asked the little girl if she had just said that she had seen stones flying across the sky. Erno clicked his tongue in displeasure, looking at all the mess, and the main character understood what dragon's blood meant: to smash a table with a fist. One man with round, seal-like eyes asked the girl if she really saw the floating stones and if she could tell where. A moment later, the protagonist was surrounded by all the family members, trying to find out if she could take them to that place right now and tell them more. But as soon as His Highness uttered the phrase, 10 steps, all the people surrounding his daughter instantly leaned back a meter. Smiling slyly, Eritam told everyone that when they spoke to his daughter, they needed to keep that distance. The family members began to apologize, and Morel, pushing everyone aside to get to the fluffy one, asked her if she knew where she had seen them. The little one replied that she knew, and when the old man asked where, she replied that it was in the mountains behind the castle. Morel asked in surprise what mountains behind the castle she meant, to which the girl, pointing to the landscape outside the window, said that in those. The old man asked in surprise if it was true that there were floating stones in the mountains on the territory of the duchy, to which the little girl cheerfully replied that it was so. The family members were skeptical and said that perhaps the child had simply confused them with other rocks, although they had never explored these mountains and could not even imagine that they could be there. His lordship said that they would lose nothing by exploring these places, so he ordered his servant to do so immediately. While the people of Etam were whispering to each other, Erno, with a sly smile, stroked the girl's head and asked in surprise why she knew so much. Hearing this, Aaron shuddered for a second and stared at the master with frightened eyes. But suddenly, the screams of servants were heard in the hall. Morel asked the butler what had happened, to which he approached him and whispered something in his ear. As soon as he was told the important news, the head of the Etam clan, gritting his teeth, hissed that his daughter had ended up in such a place. The old man walked across the table, which was broken in half, and suddenly announced that the meeting was over for today. The heroine heard the family members whispering that the Duke's expression was too bad, and that he had been so angry before that he had split the table in two. Suddenly, it dawned on the protagonist that she would soon be able to meet the main character of this novel. Erin was panicked, because she would appear much sooner than she expected, which meant that she would not be forgotten anytime soon. The baby's excitement was also noticed by her daddy. The fluffy one's soul sank into his heels when Erno suddenly said that sometimes he completely doesn't understand what his daughter is thinking about. The little girl wanted to ask what he had just said, but he seemed not to hear her, and, rising to his feet, said that it was already late. Carrying his daughter in his arms, the young gentleman told her that there was someone he wanted to introduce her to tomorrow, and that she would soon find out everything. The girl laughed in response to this, but in fact, she was wary, because she was very curious about what was going on in his head. Night fell, and Erno, putting his little one to bed in her luxurious bed, asked her if she liked the pudding, to which she said yes. Covering the young lady with a blanket, the gentleman said that if she wanted more, she could ask him at any time, and he would give as much as her soul desired. But Iron understands that soon these pleasantries will end, because, as expected, the main character will appear, and everything will go as it should, which means she will return to the place of the extra. But she is already ready for this. A barely noticeable smile graced Erno's handsome face, and he wished his daughter good night. He stroked the baby's head, and she smiled back and wished him sweet dreams. The protagonist promised herself that when the heir of Etam stopped loving her, she would never cling to him. Erin, looking at the huge and incomparable palace with a beautiful garden, asked her daddy if it would really belong to her, and he said yes. The girl clenched her fists in a fit of joy, and Erno added that the head butler and servant, as well as 30 servants of lower rank, would fulfill her whims. The little girl exclaimed that her daddy was the best, and he also handed the child a check with money and said that, as promised, there were 100 million coins in it. But suddenly, Erno's face, which was looking at his daughter, changed from smiling to confused. Taking the check with money from the little girl, he called her a scoundrel in a rude tone and ordered her to get out immediately. She asked, stunned, why? Fluffy sadly asked her daddy why he was doing this to her and reached out to him with her hand. But then she noticed that it was not human at all. The girl suddenly realized with horror that she had turned into a lizard, while Erno said that if he had only known that she was a vile reptile, he would not have even talked to her. The poor thing was locked in a cage, although she doesn't even understand how everything could have turned out like this, and that she doesn't want all this. But at one point, Erin wakes up in bed with her tiger-stuffed animal in her arms, sweating and screaming in fear. The little girl looked out the window and saw that it was deep night, which made her realize that it had all been just a dream. The day came, and the maid Mela, looking at the new image of the main character, said that she knew it. Erin wore a flowy, peach-colored dress that highlighted her hair and eyes. The servant declared that she looked very pretty, no matter what she wore. The little one asked if it really suited her, to which she replied admiringly that it did, and that the dress seemed to have been tailored especially for her. Looking at Mela, the protagonist thought that she seemed to have become more energetic after moving here, but it was not surprising, because she was getting more money. But suddenly, the main character turned around in bewilderment, because she heard someone knocking on the room door. The little one ran to the door and grabbed a toy tiger, saying that it wasn't necessary and would go, thinking that her dad had come for her. Opening the door with a huge smile, the girl told her daddy to come in, but at the very last moment she hesitated. But instead of him, she saw 2 brothers. One of them, looking at her, asked if it was really her, and the other answered that yes, although she seemed like a little thing. The protagonist stared at them in surprise, and remembered that these boys were Erno's sons. The eldest is Callan Etham, a sanguine person by nature, but very well-mannered due to his confused nature. When he grows up, he will become a powerful archmage. He said that his father brought some daughter. The younger brother is Cillian. He has a calm disposition and talent in swordsmanship. He looks like Erno, and their characters are similar. Callan suggested not to delay and hurry up, because their father was already waiting for them, to which the little girl agreed. The boys went ahead, and little Erin followed them, although she was in a hurry. The girl remembered her dream today, and thought that most likely it was not just a nightmare. In reality, as in the dream, Erno Etam madly hates reptiles, so much so that this fact was mentioned in the novel several times. The heroine had a crazy thought that as soon as he found out that she was a lizard man, he would immediately turn her into delicious canned food. Erin realized that she needed to escape from this house as quickly as possible, but she suddenly wondered if these 2 were too fast, because she could not keep up. Suddenly, just as she wanted to tell her brothers that they were too fast, they turned to her with soul-piercing looks. The girl's heart skipped a beat with fear, and she stopped, staring ahead. Cillian asked the little girl what that look was, and asked if she was staring at him like that. And Callan, smiling sarcastically, asked her how she could be such a fool, and how mom and dad were very unhappy that they had such a daughter. These childhood memories made the poor girl say that everything was fine, and since she was so slow, let her brothers go ahead themselves. Erin clasped her hands, barely holding back the tears that were welling up as one of the brothers approached her and called out to her. The girl saw that Callan reached out to her with his hand, which made her even more nervous, because the same thing was happening to her again, and she didn't want to be beaten. But it turned out that the boy just wanted to pat her on the head, which surprised her. He said that if she couldn't keep up, she could have just said so. Callan picked up his sister's toy that she had dropped on the floor and told her that they would carry it so she had nothing to worry about, then called out to his brother. Cillian, squatting down in front of the little one with his back to her, said that he would carry her, but she declared that she was so heavy. The young man laughed at her words and said that he would definitely carry her, after which Erin thought about it. In the end, Erno's son carried her on his back, which makes the protagonist very uncomfortable, because even though she is in a 5-year-old body, they are old enough to be her nephews. But suddenly, Callan called out to his sister and said that he wanted to give her one piece of advice: not to get attached, especially to her father, because he always played such jokes. The boy, frowning, added that no matter what his father said, he shouldn't take it too seriously. The main character looked at the young man with bewilderment and thought that he was unexpectedly kind. Callan told the little girl that she shouldn't worry too much, because he also knew that his father didn't love him. Cillian put Erin down on the ground, since they had already arrived, and his brother, thinking that he had said too much, decided to brush it off. But the girl, running cheerfully to the office door, said that it was nothing to worry about. She turned to her brothers, and putting her index finger to her lips, which were stretched into the sweetest smile, whispered that she, too, had a secret. The boys' eyes widened, and a scarlet blush appeared on both their cheeks. Then the door to the room where Mr. Erno was waiting for the children opened. As soon as the boys entered, they saw their father sitting at a luxurious table, where breakfast had already been prepared for several people. The gentleman asked his daughter if she had slept well that day, and she, happily running up to him, said that she had, and that she already missed him. The little girl plopped down into her dad's arms, sitting on his lap, and he praised his sons for bringing her without any problems. But suddenly, the heir Etom noticed that his boys were somehow gloomy and asked if anything had happened between them and Erin, to which they replied that no. While eating an omelet for breakfast, Callan said he had heard that the chief had suddenly left the castle, and Erno said that was true, and that it seemed he had found his elder sister's daughter. The red-haired boy asked his father if he meant the aunt who had run away long ago, and he, squeezing his daughter's cheeks, said yes. Erno asked his daughter if she liked her toy, to which she said yes. The little girl said that this tiger is very cute and warm, and when she goes to bed, she always puts it next to her. The girl thanked her dad for this. Hearing how grateful Erin was to him, Erno froze, feeling some strange feeling. But then the main character didn't notice how the ring on her dad's finger flashed red. His Highness's palm trembled, and the stone on the decoration broke into a bunch of small pieces. The chair creaked, a man coughed, and the girl dropped her toy on the floor. Erno, gritting his teeth and clutching his head, shouted to his sons to take Erin and run away from here. Callan and Cillian ran up to their dad and called out to him in fear, but he didn't respond to them. Erin fell to the floor and stared in fear at her dad, who had changed his mood so abruptly. The brothers ran to their sister to quickly take her away from here, while she thought that she had forgotten one secret of the Etom clan. When mana stagnates, the impulse to kill appears, and people call it frenzy. Erno, trying to cope with the madness that had overwhelmed him, clenched his teeth and covered his face with his hand. The girl had not expected such a turn of events at all. Looking at her daddy with fear, Erin thinks that she definitely read about this in the novel, but for some reason, she never even thought about it once. Sometimes Erno Etham's fury would break through, even despite the mana-suppressing decoration on his finger. There was a scene in the novel where during a meal with his family in the greenhouse, he suddenly went berserk and killed more than a dozen servants on the spot. Duke Morel, who was angered by this cruel incident, ordered Erno to be imprisoned for a time, and then he took the place that suited him perfectly, the monster of the Etom family. Callan, running up to his younger sister, ordered his brother to quickly go and tell everyone that they needed to hide while he took Aaron away. Cillian, sweating from the strain, nodded and said that they both had to be careful. But the main character suddenly thought how they could leave Dad here alone, especially when he was in such a desperate situation, and he was in a lot of pain. Erin, pursing her lips, began to think that there must surely be a way to help her father, so she began to frantically remember it. Here she remembers a moment from the novel, about a big tree that the brothers found in the warmest place. Their mother probably knew about this place. Then, Callan was very happy when they managed to create a medicine that calmed the frenzy, made from the berries of that tree. The protagonist immediately saw the light, because this is exactly what she needs now. Callan looked at the little girl in shock when she suddenly asked him for forgiveness. After this, the main character immediately ran away as fast as she could, and the boy shouted in bewilderment, asking where she was going. Erin ran out into the street to the frightened cries of the boys that it was dangerous for her to move around alone. As she runs towards the greenhouse with all her might, the girl reflects on the fact that she knows this is madness. But if her father is locked in prison, her money, her own island, her luxurious castle, everything will be lost, and the performance, similar to a dream, where her father loves her immensely, may end prematurely. Suddenly, the little girl notices out of the corner of her eye something that makes her emerge from her thoughts, those same red berries. In the warmest place, covered by a huge blanket of shadow, scarlet fruits grew. In the original novel, the Etham brothers who found the tree thought they were fools because they didn't know the answer was so close. Scarlet berries hang on the trees all year round, and the weather in the greenhouse is always like early summer. The boy put his palm to the tree, thinking that his mother had known about this tree before and was going to give it to them. But now, Erin put her hand to the wood, remembering those passages from the novel. She knows the main ingredient in the medicine, the one that calms the frenzy. The next moment, the girl took out her small bag from her pocket. She opened it and found a shiny pile of coins and all sorts of jewelry inside. Without any hesitation, the main character poured out all the riches from there, because now it was much more important for her to collect berries, and she could come back for the coins later. The girl reached for the first branch, thinking that this tree seemed to have a lot of thorns, so she needed to be careful. But as soon as she tried to touch the first berry, she pricked herself on a sharp thorn. The little girl was upset by this, but she gathered her strength, because she didn't even think about retreating from her goal. After some time, she managed to collect a whole bag of berries, which made the little lady very happy. She decided to hurry up to feed it to her daddy as soon as possible. But suddenly, her soul sank into her heels, because a desperate cry was heard nearby. Fluffy immediately turned around at the sound and realized that it was coming from the dining room. Erno Etham's palm mercilessly squeezed the servant's neck, who, groaning and gasping, continued to fight for his life. As soon as the man tried to call for help, Erin appeared in the doorway and called out to her father. Erno, consumed by fury, saw in her his new victim, and, throwing the servant aside, walked towards her with a terrifying smile. The girl staggered with fear, but did not think of retreating, because now Erno was the one who was in the most pain, and she really wanted to save him. From her past life experience, Erin knows that when people turn away from you in the most difficult moments, you feel useless. The little girl ran to her daddy with her little steps, screaming that she wanted to help him. Meanwhile, her favorite toy tiger, with a torn ear and body, sadly bowed its head, as if watching everything. But then Callan bursts into the room, dumbfoundedly calling for his younger sister and asking where she went. But then he shuddered. He saw a terrifyingly frightening picture. The father, with a vile smile on his face, grabbed his daughter by the throat and lifted her high above his head. The girl, trying to get out, gathered her strength and bit His Highness's palm. Erno growled in disgust and pulled his hand back, and the heroine, still in the air, dove her palm into her bag of berries in 1 second. Grabbing hold of her daddy's clothes, she deftly threw the medicine straight into his mouth. Luckily, Erno had one berry between his teeth, and after biting it, he drank the juice, which caused his body to react immediately. The man fell to the floor, and the main character realized that now was her perfect chance. She climbed onto her father's chest and stuffed a whole mountain of red berries into his mouth. A few seconds later, Erno was no longer baring his teeth. His arms dropped, and his body weakened. The girl thought that it seemed to have worked. With difficulty holding back her tears, the little girl began to pick another handful of berries. Because people are incredibly scary when they are angry, and she doesn't want to see that anymore. Suddenly, long male fingers touched Aaron's small palm, which was holding the berries. Erno, unusually calm, his fury gone, smiled tiredly at his daughter and quietly called out to her. Aaron burst into tears and clung to his arms, saying that she was very scared and that she would try to make sure that he would not be angry anymore. But he asked why he should be angry with her and that everything was fine now. The protagonist couldn't stop crying and already felt her eyes closing. She noticed that the toy her dad gave her was torn and wanted to look at it, but she couldn't because she fell asleep. Erno's pregnant wife, calling her husband simply Ear, lies on the bed and tells him that no matter how scary he is, he remains a dad who is loved by his children. But he, reading the book, only mumbled that she was talking nonsense, to which his angry wife repeated that the children only look at the best in him. The woman added that when he met such a child, he would also change, to which the gentleman indifferently said that she was just an incorrigible romantic. Dahlia exclaimed that she was already tired of his stubbornness and said that in such cases a sweet daughter was needed, but he muttered that 3 children would be enough for them. His wife, pregnant with their 3rd child, said she hoped it would be a girl so he would understand that there are people in this world that are impossible not to love. The woman told her husband with a smile that perhaps this child would change his world and she would like him to no longer be alone. So Dahlia, who loved empty chatter and never gave birth to a 3rd child, was the first to leave this world. Callan, running up to Dad through the debris of furniture lying on the floor, asked excitedly if everything was okay. Erno, checking with his finger whether the girl was asleep, thought that, fortunately, she was not badly hurt. But suddenly, a loud, frightened cry was heard in the room, and His Highness and his son saw a servant in the doorway, covering her mouth with her hand. Callan wanted to ask her how she dared to behave like that in the presence of the master, but she quickly ran away. But the father stopped his son because he believes that this is a completely normal reaction to what he did. A look full of prejudice, eyes filled with horror, and running away to survive. Once a frenzy begins, there is only one way to stop it. Someone stronger than the one who has gone berserk must suppress it. However, this time there was neither Duke Morel nor his first son in the castle, and then no one would have been able to stop Erno. But the heir of Atom cannot help but be surprised, because the little girl Erin, despite everything, decided to help him. Suddenly, His Highness noticed that his daughter's favorite toy was torn in several places. The man immediately remembered the moment when Erin, tenderly hugging her tiger, said that she liked him more than anyone else. Erno then sadly realized that he shouldn't have burned all the other toy tigers in the store. Suddenly, the door to the room creaked, creating a thin gap through which Cillian cautiously peered out. The father allowed his son to enter, and he began to ask how everything had turned out, to which his brother, twirling Iron's bag in his hands, said that the frenzy had calmed down. Cillian asked how they stopped the attack, and Callan, throwing him a bag, said that he would explain later and asked him to take the berries to his lab. He added that this was probably the main ingredient. He was offended by his brother because of his orders, but the boy was already leaving, so he could do nothing. Cillian sighed that someone else's work had been given to him, but was already reassured by the fact that at least no one had died. Erno walked silently down the corridor with the sleeping girl in his arms, and his eldest son followed behind him. Callan, with some embarrassment, asked his father if it was true that these berries had stopped his rampage. The gentleman, without even deigning to look at his son, said that it seemed that everything was exactly like that. Erin snored quietly in her daddy's arms as the boy asked how she could have known the way to calm the frenzy, since they had been looking for it for a long time. Erno responded just as indifferently that he had no idea and that his daughter had many secrets. But suddenly, Callan stopped and suggested that Dad stop this game, because she helped him and he felt sorry for her. Especially since last year Dad made a deal with that boy, and nothing like that happened to her. But the father coldly replied that it was none of his business, to which the son objected that she had saved him anyway, despite the danger. But the young gentleman, glancing at the boy out of the corner of his eye, asked him not to make him repeat it twice. Callan frowned and pursed his lips before he managed to force out an apology. Erno went on, telling his son that he had suffered a lot today, so he should go and rest quickly, to which he bowed and agreed. Some time later, Erin was laid on a bed where several servants tended to her, applying a cool compress to her forehead. One of the maids said she would go get some spare clothes. At that time, Erno stood nearby and watched everything. The man remembered his dead wife, and looking at the unconscious girl, he realized that it was just a game to relieve boredom. Some time passed. The heroine woke up and opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the ceiling and the chandelier, so she tried to figure out where she was. Suddenly, she jumped out of bed and screamed at the top of her lungs because she remembered that she had left the jewelry outside. At that moment, Mela entered the room. The maid was glad that the baby had woken up, and sympathetically began to tell her that something terrible had happened, after which she did not wake up for a week. Erin looked at her and asked, puzzled, if it had really been a whole week since she had lost consciousness. She, theatrically shedding a tear, said that everything was exactly like that, and that her heart had been in a turmoil all this time out of fear for her beloved mistress. But then the little lady began to whisper mysteriously that since a whole week had passed, she should have arrived here by now. Mila, seeing this, became worried about the little one and asked if she was okay. The maid's eyes widened, and she asked Erin which girl she was talking about. At this time, in the courtyard of the castle, a little girl approached two maids who were resting during a break and asked where she could find the head's office. One girl said that she needed to go up to the second floor and walk to the end of the corridor, after which she thanked her. The child went along the appointed path, and the maids whispered about who this lady was, and said that she was the daughter of the Duchess, who had recently been sought. They have no idea that this beauty is the main character of the novel I Thought I Was Lucky with My Adoptive Parents, but it turned out to be an illusion. Charnay. Charnay Atom has the ability to calm the rage and a sunny disposition, for which everyone in the novel loves her. Over time, she was even able to melt the cruel and cold soul of Erno Etham. At first, he only used the main character when he needed to, but as the story progressed, he opened up to her more. She is a precious creature born to a cold-blooded father. She is the protagonist that everyone loves so much. This is the highlight of The Adoption Delusion, and the reason why Miso in her past life was so excited when she read it. She also really wanted to be like Sharn, because then the whole family would love her. However, soon the simple student realized that all her dreams were just illusions on paper, and she was not the main character. Maid Mela, stirring the soup that was prepared for the baby who had woken up, said that everyone was very worried about her. While feeding the girl, she told her that Callan and Cillian came almost every day, and the Duke came and asked to be taken to her when she woke up. Erin asked if Erno had come to see her, to which she replied that he had come a few days ago, but not since, probably because he had been very busy. The maid added that the Duke had brought the dead daughter's child into the house, and that there were rumors that she had been adopted. The little girl, hearing this, hardly reacted at all, but only said sadly that that's how it is. Mela, handing the girl the last spoonful of soup, said in amazement that it wasn't pudding, and yet she was eating it with such an appetite and not being capricious. The maid confessed to the young lady that she would be very happy if she had such an obedient daughter as she, for which the young lady thanked her. The girl laughed and said that, on the contrary, she was grateful to her, because thanks to her, she had so many happy events. Mela is thrilled that she has been promoted, and even her salary has been raised, and she can see such a sweet lady every day, as if she had received a divine blessing. But suddenly, the maid's face changed dramatically, and with a frightening smile, she told Erin that she would have to obey her from now on. The stunned girl wanted to ask again, but she suddenly got up from her chair and declared that the time had already come. Pointing to a luxurious pink dress that was nearby, the servant suggested that they begin preparing for the meeting with the Duke. Soon the girl found herself at the door of the office, where Erno and the chief were waiting for her. The guard said that they could enter, and the maid thanked him. Erin, dressed up like a doll, thought that once she entered there, she would see the real main character. However, as she opened the door, she realized that she simply did not need to have high hopes, because then she herself would not be disappointed, but would simply go there. The girl entered the room, where she first saw her daddy, who greeted her with a glance. Opposite him stood Morel. behind whose back the shy Charn was hiding. Erin smiled happily from ear to ear and told her father and grandfather that she was glad to see them, thinking that this main character was quite cute. The black-haired young beauty hid behind her grandfather, who, calling the protagonist Fluffy, told her to come here. Erno simply glanced at the little girl and then turned away as if nothing had happened. Erin was confused by this and thought that his interest in her had already waned, but she hadn't really expected anything anyway, so she wasn't really surprised. Morel told the child that thanks to her pointing out a new source of floating stones, his business had taken off, and also, while he was gone, she had helped that scoundrel with his rampage. Then the head, thoughtfully touching his chin with his fingers, asked his granddaughter if she knew the word to repay. Grandpa explained that he wanted to repay her for her help, so to speak, to reward her, and the girl was already happy in her soul and clenched her fists. The old man said that he would explain it to her a little more simply. He was ready to fulfill any of her wishes, be it any enterprise, the name of the main family, or something else. On the outside, the little girl didn't show any emotion, but her real 23-year-old soul gasped with delight, because now she could ask for anything. She ran up to her grandfather and declared that she wanted money, 1,000,000 losts, because that was exactly what she needed, and not some enterprise or family name. In the world of adoption delusion, the value of currency is the same as in real life in Korea. In other words, 1,000,000 lost is 1,000,000 won. Morel asked if she really wanted 1,000,000 losts, to which she nodded and thought that that should be enough. The chief suddenly sighed and began to rummage through his sleeve, which surprised the girl, because she thought that he did not want to give them to her, although he had plenty of money. The emerald bracelet on the gentleman's wrist sparkled, and he asked the little girl in a serious tone if she really valued her help so little. Erin was surprised when she saw a platinum-ranked bracelet on her grandfather's wrist. He bent down, brought his bracelet to the girl's bracelet, and said that he valued her help at a whopping 100,000,000 lost. The protagonist showed no emotion, just clenched her fists and closed her eyes. But in reality, she was ready to ascend to heaven with happiness. Erin happily thanked the head, because she could not even dream of such money in her past life, when she felt her dad lifting her into his arms. Erno smiled and told his daughter that she shouldn't pick up anything from the ground, then brought his bracelet to hers, withdrawing all 100,000,000 from her account. The gentleman explained that it was a bad habit and that it could give him a tummy ache. The child burst into tears, and Morel called his son a little brat. But then Erno again presented the bracelet to her wrist and transferred a whole 1,000,000,000 lost to the girl's account. The protagonist almost froze with her mouth open when she saw her balance. Now, in Erin's eyes, Erno was not just a daddy, but a real deity. Morel angrily told his son that he was doing a lot of stupid things, but suggested that they move on to the process of adopting Sharni as soon as possible, as that would help him. But he, exchanging tenderness with his daughter, told the head that he had already said everything. He already had a daughter. The novel's protagonist stared at Erin in confusion, and her grandfather angrily asked if he thought he was joking, and repeated that this girl had the power to tame his fury. Fluffy watched Daddy with a warm smile, to whom the boss was telling him that he was, of course, a complete impudent fellow, but did not want to harm the children. The heroine thought that, after all, the end was clear from the very beginning, and told her father that she would go first. Erno agreed and told the girl to go to her room, and he would come to see her before dinner. As she prepared to open the door, the protagonist thought that an extra like her really couldn't become his daughter, and convinced herself that she didn't care. But in reality, the real Miso, holding back a tear, admits that she is just a little sad. But that is normal, and besides, she has already earned money. After leaving the room, Erin met Mela, who asked the lady why she had returned so quickly, and said that she had received some pocket money. Then the little girl said she would go to bed first. The maid offered to make the bed first, but she said she could do it herself and said goodbye. The maid wanted to say that she could make the bed, but the girl had already disappeared down the hallway. Mela remained standing, thinking about how Erin, as usual, only did good deeds until the very end. She looked out the window with a sly smile and thought about starting to implement the plan, even though everything would work out a little earlier than expected. It's 5 o'clock in the evening, and while in a separate building, Erin secretly looks out of the corridor to see if anyone is there. Making sure that there was no one nearby, she sighed with relief, but asked herself what she had to do. In this story, she is a minor lizard character planning a quick escape, and after what just happened, she quickly packed her things. But in order to take back everything stolen from a separate building, she will attempt a break-in that she has never even thought about in her life. The girl remembers that when she was walking here, she met 2 guards, but they didn't suspect anything at all, and all that was left was to collect the jewelry. But suddenly, the heroine froze, because she heard someone appear in the corridor. It was Mela, who ran past her with some kind of package in her hands. The little girl couldn't understand what was in it, and thought that something had happened. But then she heard the voice and footsteps of another guard, who said that this time he would take over patrolling this floor. The protagonist realized that the time for her plan was very inopportune, so she hurried back to her room and quickly packed everything, because today her dinner with Erno could be her last. But suddenly, Erin's eyes widened. She woke up on her bed in the same clothes, being woken up by her favorite maid. She immediately jumped up and shouted that she was actually going to have dinner with Daddy, to which Mila said that he had business yesterday. The girl looked in surprise at the servant, who said that Erno had not even left the room yesterday, and now she understood why she had not even changed her clothes. Fluffy, recalling the events of yesterday evening, was sadly surprised that it turned out she hadn't gone anywhere. The young lady remembered that yesterday, when she returned to her room from a separate building, she waited for Erno until 9 p.m., and then fell asleep without waiting for him. But the protagonist thinks that this is not surprising, because a real main character has appeared, and now they have definitely forgotten about her. But suddenly, the little girl's eyes widened like buttons when the maid said that Erno was, in fact, forbidden to leave the room. The maid, brushing away the dust, added that she did not know the details, but had heard that the Duke was very angry. Erin felt much better when she realized that it turned out that Daddy hadn't come to her because he didn't like her anymore. But the next second, the little girl hit herself on the head with her fists, mentally asking herself what she was thinking, because she had promised herself that she would not place any hopes on Erno. The heroine asked Mila if she could go to her daddy now, and she said yes. Iron, dressed up, said goodbye to the maid and went to her daddy. The girl glanced into the office, greeted Erno, and asked if she could come in, but saw something that made her hesitate for a moment. The father was sitting on the sofa, and opposite him was Charn, and together they were holding hands while looking at the fluffy one with bewilderment. The little girl, hiding behind the door, timidly apologized to the gentleman for coming when he was busy. However, Erno extended his hand to his daughter, said that he was not busy, and then asked her to come in. Erin was shy at first, but then she approached her dad with pity and asked if his grandfather had scolded him. But he suddenly asked the little girl if she had ever seen a sword from which tongues of flame burst forth. The child asked why he was asking such a question, to which His Highness, asking her to look at the door, said that she would see it now and began counting from 3. As soon as Erno finished counting, Morel burst into the room with a fiery sword in his hands, furiously calling out to his son. The old man said that it would not be enough to chew him up and spit him out for daring to re-register the mines in the mountains as private property. The head of the clan, waving his sword, asked Erno whether he could think at all or not. Iron thought that this flame was a dragon relic. Its name was the Flame of Indignation, and she saw it for the first time with her own eyes. But the heir Etam calmly told the chief that he himself had said that he would give the mines to him. He angrily shouted that such a thing had never happened, but in reality it was. Morel told his son in the past that if he continued to live such a miserable life, then his only inheritance would be those mountains outside the castle walls. Erno told the old man that he had said this 2 years ago in the office, to which he, remembering everything, became embarrassed for a second. But Morel shouted again that he had once refused them, and now he had decided to take them back. Calling this dog nonsense, he ordered his son to return them, but he only laughed from the top of his head, and, taking his words literally, barked like a dog with a sweet smile. His lordship's sword melted, and he himself froze, losing his jaw and the remnants of his sanity. The grandfather called his son a scoundrel, and he asked him to leave quickly, because he still needed to talk to his daughter. Mirel indignantly asked how he dared to send him away, since he hadn't finished yet. But Erno had already managed to snap his fingers in front of him. At that very second, thanks to magic, the head of the family found himself on the street, where he was immediately noticed by a dog walking on the grass. The dog began to happily circle around the man, and then lick his face. The old man was so shocked that he could only curse at the top of his lungs. When the main problem was solved, Erno, as if nothing had happened, told his daughter that she had arrived just in time. The gentleman only had to click his fingers, and the toy tiger appeared in the air. His Highness said that he should have given it to her at dinner because it was her treasure, for which he apologized. Taking her pet in her arms, Aaron thought that, fortunately, everything was okay with him, and for some reason, he seemed even softer to her than he was. The girl smiled sweetly and thanked her daddy, adding that she would now wear it even more carefully. Suddenly, Sharna leaned over to the heroine and asked if she could pinch this cutie's cheeks. She, thinking that she was talking about her toy, handed her her tiger and said that of course she could. But the little one was slightly taken aback when the black-haired beauty grabbed her by the cheeks, not the toy. It turns out she was talking about her, not the tiger. Squeezing Aaron's face, Sharna let out a delighted squeal that she knew her cheeks would feel like buns that had just come out of the oven. But suddenly, the girl shuddered and froze when the fluffy one, calling her little sister, asked not to ruffle her so much. The protagonist, noticing her strange reaction, wondered if she had called her something wrong and said that she thought she was like an older sister to her. But when she looked at Sharn's face, she saw that she was trying her best to hold back her happy smile. The brunette squeezed herself into a tight embrace with her new sister, screaming how cute it was, which surprised her very much, because she squeezed her with such force that it was hard to even breathe. Without letting go of Aaron, Sharna happily said that she was 3 years older than her. She was 8, so she really wanted them to call each other sisters. The main character of the novel said that she was very glad that everything worked out for them, and she should have been told right away that she had such a wonderful younger sister. The girl added that they would live in harmony, but at that moment, Erno's gaze, which was watching them, somehow became frighteningly cold. Later, the protagonist, walking down the corridor, talks about how she will definitely run away today because Sharn has already appeared, which means there is no longer any place for her. The girl realizes that there is no point in interfering in these matters anymore, and especially since her place will soon be taken by the real main character of the novel. As proof of her arguments, the little girl cites the fact that Erno's gaze, directed at her, has changed compared to the past. But then Aaron grabbed her head, because she was thinking about the wrong thing again. Daddy's behavior was natural, because the main character had finally appeared. However, as she approached the window overlooking the garden, the girl began to think that the reason was hidden somewhere completely different. Looking out the window, she saw Charn swinging on a swing under a tree. The real reason is that in this scene, the main character of the novel shines so brightly that she can never compare to it in her life, because she has a light that no one can defeat. Sharna, swinging on the swing and playing the accordion, suddenly noticed Aaron's gaze on her, after which she smiled cheerfully at her and waved her hand. Some time later, they were drinking tea together. Blackhair told the little girl that her grandfather had called her into his office. She thought it was because of her rage. Fluffy wanted to enjoy her favorite pudding, but her sister stopped her and said that she wanted to feed her herself, scooping up the dessert with a spoon. Then Sharnay smiled and handed the spoon to Aaron and asked her to open her mouth and say, "Ah!" 23-year-old student Miso, who was sitting in the body of a small child, was slightly horrified by this picture. But without thinking twice, she ate the spoon that her sister held out to her. Charn immediately threw herself into the baby's arms, screaming how cute it was. She asked her friend in admiration why she was so cute when she ate. But then the dark-haired girl said that she was very glad that she had Aaron, because even the road to this palace seemed unfamiliar to her, and she was very worried. The protagonist told Sharna that she would soon become her uncle's daughter. He would buy her a lot of toys, and besides, she would soon get used to it. Suddenly, the main character of the novel confessed to the little girl that she actually did not want to become his daughter. She said she only came here because she was told she needed a guardian and had no other choice. Erin was very surprised by her sister's words and looked at her with new eyes, wondering if she had always had such a character, because in the novel she didn't like it here either, but she wasn't so cold either. The little girl wonders if it might be because the story has just begun, because over time many things will happen that will bring Charney and Erno closer together. The heroine recalls that the first such event was the case of the theft of the dragon relic Etam. In the Etam family, each relic chooses its own owner, and 3 such dragon relics are passed down through generations. The first is the flame of indignation that the head of the family is now using. The second relic is a shard of balance, which now belongs to Mr. Erno. And the third is a dragon pearl, which shimmers blue like a star. And this time, the second thing will be stolen, the balance shard that Erno wears on his ear in the form of an earring. This thing can correct the tilted balance. At the beginning of The Illusion of Adoption, it was she who supported Erno's unstable mental state. And this relic was also the reason why Duke Morel could not simply take and throw the impudent, insolent man out of the palace. Thanks to the fact that the main character of the novel resolved this matter, Charney and Erno began to get closer. But Erin had a completely different problem. She does not remember at all who is supposed to steal the relic. Fluffy became very nervous, because in her past life she had read the novel a bunch of times, but for some reason she couldn't remember. She wondered whether she should take this feat away from the main character, even though she had already done it. She had discovered the source of the floating stones in the mountains. At this time, Charn, noticing that her sister was lost in her thoughts, asked her what was the matter, to which she embarrassedly said that everything was fine. Chernavlaska, gently taking her friend by the hands, said that if something was bothering her, then she just needed to tell her, and she would help her. The heroine of the novel seriously said that, although they had met only recently, she already felt like a real sister in her, so she wanted to support her. Fluffy thanked her for her concern and admitted with a smile that she was simply thinking about what the menu would be for dinner today. Charn fell silent, but then suddenly told her sister that she wanted her to be happy always and never worry. Erin was surprised by this and remembered that in her past life, she always wanted to be like the main character. She really likes the fact that everyone loves her, and she wanted to be as kind and welcoming as Charney. Erin was inspired by a certain dream, and, grabbing the novel's main character by the hands, shouted that she wanted to make her even happier. Looking at the blushing black-haired girl, Miso decided that she wanted to surpass the main novel and make her relationship with Erno even more cordial. The protagonist has decided that she really wants her favorite heroine, Sharna, to be even happier than in the original. Sharna thanked her sister shyly, and she, looking at her with shining eyes, said that she, too, could tell her about her problems at any time. That night, Erin threw the bag of escape things deep into the closet again. The morning came, and Mela, dressing the young lady in a beautiful outfit, asked her if she had already prepared a gift, to which she asked what she meant. The maid was surprised that she didn't know yet, and told her that today was Mr. Erno's birthday. The girl said that she didn't know about it. Mela, putting a shoe on the little girl's foot, asked if she should be the first to give him a present today, since she was his only daughter. Having secured the shoe, the maid began to talk to the little girl about the fact that, since she had forgotten, there was one gift that would definitely please the master. The girl then asked if she remembered the earring he was wearing in his ear, and said that it was actually a pearl that had other fragments. The protagonist froze and thought that yesterday's thoughts came to her mind as if they were not from this reality. The criminal who stole the relic was not a particularly significant character in the story. The maid explained that if all the fragments were collected together, the master would no longer become scary, and she also knew where they were. Erin recalls that the same thing happened in the novel. Mela suggested that she give Erno the shards, assuring him that then he would definitely adopt her instead of Charney. The little lady asked the maid if she could stay with her then, and she answered yes, then asked if she was willing to listen to her request. Mila asked Erin the same thing now. Fortunately, the girl remembered who the criminal was in the novel. The servant's green eyes flashed with poisonous anticipation, and her lips spread into a disgusting, hypocritical smile. The maid was sure that the girl would fulfill her request, because she always obeyed her. So with a joyful smile, she asked if this was true. But she suddenly said no, and sticking her tongue out at the girl, she affirmatively declared that she would not do this. After this, the little girl ran away from the maid, who said in surprise that she had been taking care of her all this time. But the young lady, taking off her shoes and climbing onto the bed, said that Daddy told her that stealing is bad, so she would pretend that nothing had happened. But then the main character froze when the maid mockingly said that in that case, she could tell her that she was turning into a lizard. With a venomous smile, Mela asked the lady if she thought she knew nothing, since she had been with her for so long. The maid reminded the girl that the initial transformation was supposed to have happened during the New Year's gathering, then asked the child if the cocoa had been tasty back then. The protagonist first wondered what she was talking about, but then realized that she was talking about the cocoa she drank during their first meeting. Erin clutched her toy tighter in fear, and the maid added that she had been told that this potion had excellent effects, but it seemed she had been deceived. Holding back tears, the girl closed her eyes when she heard the sound of the door opening. Mela said that it didn't matter anymore, because it was already late anyway. She, drilling the heroine with a furious look and calling her a little one, said that she would regret it. Time outside the window was already dragging on towards evening, and Erin was still lying on the bed, wrapped in a blanket and immersed in her thoughts. She understands that everything will eventually go as in the novel. Thanks to the main character, the theft case will be resolved, and Erno will become interested in her. The young lady remembers that only yesterday she had a goal to stay in the palace, but everything went to hell in an instant. Curled up under the blanket like an offended kitten, the little girl, shedding a tear, wondered why her life always looked like this. The night of the new moon is a night of peace sent by the dragon, when the blood and madness of the Etam clan fall fast asleep. On this night, all members of the Etam family have their strength weakened, so the castle's security is strengthened as much as possible. But there is one more but. The protagonist went out for a walk in the yard, but every now and then she heard people whispering about her. They talked about how she could do such a thing, repay good with evil, and yet Mela cared about her. It turns out that the maid had made a noise that night. The little girl, angry that she had actually done something wrong, wondered if she should run away right then. But then a man blocked the girl's path. He bowed and introduced himself as the head butler of the Etam family, named Kalo. Fluffy started to get nervous when the butler told her that they needed to go somewhere together, but she still agreed, realizing that it had finally happened. The girl finds herself in a conference room where a crowd has gathered. She realizes that everyone knows she is a lizard person, so she just accepts it. Opposite her stood Mela, and on the throne stood Morel, together with the heir and his 2 sons. His lordship told the girl in a stern tone that she was now answering all his questions truthfully. Erno looked at everyone with a sullen look, and the old man explained to the little girl that he had heard that she had conspired with the men in black and stolen his earring. The chief asked if it was true, but the girl was overcome with fear, because she did not understand at all why this accusation was being pinned on her. But in a second, she understood everything and looked with hatred at Mela, who was standing next to her and wiping away invisible tears. The maid decided to blame everything on her. Suddenly, Erin shuddered, because the leader added that he knew that she was a half-human. Morel, fed up with the silence, angrily shouted at the child that she must answer clearly, either yes or no. The girl understands that she is a lizard person, but she did not steal the earring, which is what she wanted to say. But at one point, she hesitated. Erin's vision began to blur and her head began to spin, as if she was about to lose consciousness. At the last moment, she looked into the face of her maid, not understanding what was happening, but saw that she was hiding her sly smile behind her scarf. Suddenly, only the protagonist's clothes remained on the floor, and everyone present in the hall stared at her in surprise, wondering what kind of magic this was. But suddenly, one woman squealed, and pointing her finger at the clothes, shouted that there was something there. Erin was overcome with horror when she realized that she had turned into a small lizard, which scared the crap out of everyone present. The reptile rushed through the legs of the people, who turned around in amazement and shouted that it needed to be caught quickly. A certain baron, when a lizard was about to rush past him, ordered everyone around to step on it. He managed to achieve what he wanted. He stepped on the animal's tail with his heel, crushing it painfully, a pain that she had never felt before, shot through Erin's entire body, like she had been electrocuted. The poor thing continued to run away, so her tail was torn off from her body, remaining lying under the Baron's foot, who continued to scream. While the gentleman could not recover from the shock of the fact that Iron, a lizard man, was the lowest of all ranks, the reptile climbed high up on the column. The lizard, holding on to a stone column, cannot find the strength to hold back her tears, because she is incredibly offended and hurt, and besides, she does not understand at all why she has to go through something like this. However, the people, preoccupied with the lizard, did not even notice that Erno Atom himself was heading towards them. To his surprise, he calmly approached the lizard that had gathered on the column, called out to her, and, holding out his hands, asked her to come down. But she didn't do this, because she thought that he was probably disappointed, because he hated reptiles to the point of madness. But then the main character notices her toy, which she received from him as a gift, on the floor next to the gentleman. Suddenly, the lizard felt its paws slip off the stone column. The reptile with the severed tail did not understand how she flew down. As she fell, the girl thought that if she fell from this height, she would get a concussion. At the last moment, the lizard closed her eyes and thought that she didn't want to die, and it didn't matter where. She just wanted to get out of here. A tear rolled down Erin's eyes, and magical light suddenly began to flow from her body. Suddenly, a stranger, walking through the forest, found a toy tiger on the ground, on which an unconscious pink lizard lay. The stranger picked up the reptile in his arms, and seeing that she had no tail, affectionately asked where she had managed to lose it. The mysterious guy with long purple hair told the lizard that he, too, had lost his parents, so they were similar in some ways. The young man smiled and told the reptile that he liked her, so she would be his pet. At this time in the palace, while surprised people were discussing what kind of light it was and where the lizard had gone, Mela was thinking that she had finally succeeded. With a sly smile, she reasoned that now she could return to the guild, to the work of her whole life, but she did not notice how someone approached her from behind. Immediately, a piercing female scream was heard, and the puzzled members of the clan turned around to look at the sound. Erno, having wounded Maila in the arm with a sword, causing her to fall to the floor in fear, kept repeating that his daughter was crying. The maid tried to explain that Iron was not his daughter, but he, approaching her menacingly, said that she was wrong. He asked if she needed any explanations, and then struck her a second time. The maid no longer made any sounds, and Erno, from whom blue flames were pouring, swung his sword and ordered the Baron standing next to him to speak. He tried to retreat out of fear, but a magical wall of blue fire prevented him from doing so, which made him even more nervous. Right behind him was the heir of Etam, who suggested that he mutter something else, like when he ordered everyone to crush the lizard. Having punished the Baron with his sword, Erno frowned when the chief sternly asked him if it was necessary to shed blood now, and reminded him to know when to stop. Wiping his blood-stained sword, the young man told the old man that if he hadn't started this mess in the first place, none of this would have happened. He shouted that he himself brought this little thing to turn everything upside down, then asked if he was going to adopt her at all, since she was a lizard. Erno glanced at his reflection on the blade of his sword, and frowned furiously when Morel said that Viren might not have Etam blood at all. The young gentleman could not resist and threw the weapon straight at the old man, but he fought back with lightning speed, deflecting the sword with an ordinary writing pen. The sword fell behind the grandfather, and the heir Etam said that it was up to him to decide, and in any case, Iron was his daughter. Morel continued to look irritatingly at the guy who announced that he was leaving the house for a while. The chief asked where he was going, and what would happen if he went berserk outside, to which he, without turning around, said that it was because of him, and before that happened, it would be better to return his daughter to him quickly. His lordship furiously ordered the heir to stand still, because he himself did not know that his body was already at its limit. The head butler appeared next to the leader and told him that he had gone a little too far this time. He told Kylo that he was going to do the same. The maid's body was trembling on the floor, and the steward told the gentleman that, as he had heard yesterday, she was that very secret agent. Kylo explained to the leader that even though he had called them so that she would confess herself, for a child who knew nothing, it looked exactly like a threat. The old man asked him not to talk nonsense and went on. The butler asked if they would find iron, to which he said he had no idea. Kylo said that in that case, he would give the command to the Tarim, and Morel repeated that he knew nothing and allowed him to do as he wanted. The butler said that he would immediately inform her when they found her, after which he sighed heavily. Looking at all the chaos that was going on in the meeting room, he thought that in any case, nothing ever went smoothly in this family. Some time passed, and the main character, still in the form of a lizard, stared intently with her yellow eyes at the stranger. A young man with long purple hair told the little girl with a smile that she would now be called Snake. How the protagonist fell into his hands. She ran away when the secret of her origin was revealed, and opened her eyes in a new place. After the nightmare that happened to her, she lost consciousness and found herself in the place where she had planned to go at the very beginning, in a temporary orphanage. The boy smiled and said that her new name was wonderful. He was an amazing boy, who, in Aaron's opinion, was completely incapable of coming up with names. The future owner of the Magic Tower, one of the secondary male characters of The Adoption Illusion, Richard Collin. There was a scene in the novel where Richard, bursting with hysterical laughter, asks his test subject to try to go wild some more, because if your feet are hot, you need to dance even more merrily. Then the guy suggested conducting another experiment, where he wants to find out what line a person must cross to start begging for death. He reassured his victims that he had no intention of killing them, which led readers to call this character a psycho. Richard told Snake that he had saved her, and in other words, she now belonged to him and should henceforth remain only with him. The lizard sighed, because she remembered that in the future he became obsessed with the main character, and now she already sees the makings of this. Since arriving at this orphanage, Aaron has been trying to turn back into a human, but she doesn't know how and sees no hope of success. Because of this, the lizard became upset and began to tremble, and Richard asked if she had had a tail from the very beginning. But suddenly, Aaron's eyes widened when the boy asked if she got hurt because other lizards bullied her. The youth, frowning, said that people and lizards are equally cruel, like all living creatures. They try to get rid of those who are different. But suddenly, the protagonist thought about the fact that, if you remember, Richard was also an unhappy child who grew up in captivity of many stereotypes. He had an extraordinary mind that stood out from the others. He was handsome, had a talent for magic, and, unlike the others, he had no parents. Taking the snake in his hands and admiring her, he promised her that he would make her so strong that she would be able to take revenge on her enemies. Richard asked his pet how she liked this idea, which made her embarrassed, because she believed that there was no one she wanted to take revenge on. But then Aaron remembered her past life, where she was openly ignored by her own brothers, and she thought that maybe such people exist. The protagonist didn't even have time to say anything before the young man told her that since she agreed, they would begin training tomorrow. But then a man burst into the room and called out loudly to Richard, which caused him to go into shock. The boy turned around in shock and told the principal that he had asked him to knock before entering. A tall man with gray hair and stubble sternly asked the child why he had missed training today, to which he replied that he simply did not want to come, so he did not come. The principal sighed wearily and told Ridu that he understood that he didn't have a friend to go to training with, but the training was still mandatory. The youth cried out in fear that this was not the reason he had not come. Suddenly, Richard covered his new pet with his palm to hide her, causing her to squeak in fear. The sound could not be hidden, and an awkward silence arose between the boy and the director. The man told the child that he had already told him that pets were not allowed in the building, but the child giggled excitedly that he had simply misunderstood. Rid tried to justify himself and said that he had simply hiccuped and, showing his palm, assured that he had nothing, although everything was visible on the table. The director told the boy that he could clearly see that there was something on the table, so he asked him to move away. But the boy suddenly shouted angrily that he had no desire to show him. Richard, armed with his magic, told the man that, although he was the director, he would not allow him to take away what belonged to him. From the novel, the main character recalls a very old story. A long time ago, there lived a sincere and kind man who created a close-knit family. One day, while working as usual, he heard a divine whisper, "Take up a sword and defend this land." After some time, a war suddenly began, And the man, who had received divine revelation, went to war and boldly cut the throats of his enemies. Thanks to him, victory was achieved, but everything around looked terrible. Orphans, burning houses, dead bodies, and also grieving heroes. Mired in deep grief, the man soon left the village and went into hiding, because he did not understand what the point of being a hero of the holy war with the demons was, if he had lost his wife and daughter. And no one knew where the war hero went, although there were many rumors about him. But now that Reed was threatening to use magic against the director, Erin began to think that this situation was becoming too serious. However, she glanced out of the corner of her eye at the adult man and remembered that the kid had called him director, which meant she knew who it was. This man with gray hair is definitely the hero of the holy war against the demons. He indifferently told Richard that he was not going to throw away his pet, but would only give her to a good place, to which he stated that he would take better care of her. The lizard began to creep, and the boy said that he wanted to keep the animal for himself, and he just needed to avoid being seen by the other kids with it. The snake jumped off the table, which surprised its owner greatly, and the war hero, seeing it, asked in shock what the lizard was doing there. Suddenly, the reptile, coming closer to the man, folded its paws together and bowed to him. The heroine of the holy war was amazed beyond measure, and the lizard continued to bow its head to him. He asked the animal if she was asking to be allowed to stay in this house, to which Erin nodded happily, because that was exactly what she was doing. The director told how amazing it was. The lizard seemed to understand his words, and since she was so smart, he didn't mind. The man told Richard that in that case he would allow him to keep the reptile, which made him stare at him in amazement. But the director, closing the door behind him, told the boy that in return he demanded that he take his studies seriously, after which he said that he would go. He finally asked the boy to be present at training tomorrow, after which Erin and Reed were left alone, digesting in their heads what had happened. Suddenly, the young wizard fell to the lizard's knees, stunned, asking her what she had just done and whether she really understood human speech. Picking up the reptile in his hand, the young man said with a smile that he knew he had a brilliant eye and that fate itself had brought them together. Squeezing Snake's tummy, the guy told her that she should always be next to him now, but Erin thought that this was wrong, because in fact, they both had a place to return to. Richard promised the lizard that if she ran away, he would follow her to hell and then forbid her. Suddenly, the boy kissed the reptile on the face, causing Erin to fall out of reality a little. The protagonist understands that she must not forget that he is a secondary male character, the future owner of the magic tower and a real psycho. Some time passed, and the young magician came to the dining room to organize himself a lunch, but several guys at the table began to whisper about him. Reed, scooping up some spaghetti, thought with a smile that he would take some food and eat quickly, and then bring the snake some fruit. But the boys at the table, looking at him, began to gossip about how he was lazing around every day at training, but had come back again to fill his belly. One young man said that he did not understand why the director loved Richard so much, and another said that he even lived in a spacious room, unlike them. The little wizard could only listen to how they talked about him. Before, he was a slave, and the director probably just took pity on him. As Rid was pouring himself some tomato sauce, he heard the boys talking about how he used to lick everyone's feet like an abandoned puppy. The gossips decided that he was quite the impudent fellow, while the object of their gossip headed straight towards them. Suddenly, the young wizard threw his plate of dinner right into the face of the offender, who did not suspect anything. Rid, glaring at the boy with an icy gaze and calling them stupid pigs, said that their squeals were making too much noise. The sorcerer's menacing shadow loomed over the tomato-stained boy, who was ordered to repeat what he had just said. The gossip, covering his dirty face with his hand, asked Rid what they had done to him. He asked if he shouldn't remember, then, preparing to use his magic, said that with it he would make him remember everything. But then the magician's small and fragile hand was intercepted by another adult male palm. The director, frowning and glaring at the boy, said that he had warned them that they were forbidden to use magic on other people. Richard shouted angrily at the man that he himself had heard what they were saying about him, and that they had started it. The war hero explained to the boy that his interlocutor could die, so it was dangerous. But the young magician, pulling his hand back, cursed, and asked what difference it made whether they died or not, because if he himself died, they would only be happy. Suddenly, Rid grabbed the man from behind and shouted that he had had enough, because he didn't really know anything. The hero of the war with demons tried to ask where he was running, but he seemed not to hear him and rushed out into the street, pushing other children aside. The director looked around in bewilderment and assessed the mess that the young magician had made. The man suggested that the dirty boy go to the medical center. It was approaching evening, and the main character, sitting by the open window, melancholically watched the landscape. The girl is sad because Rid promised to bring her fruits, but never returned. She is already wondering if something happened to him. But suddenly, the lizard heard a man's voice approaching her and calling out to her. As soon as the stranger's foot appeared in the room, Aaron instantly jumped off the windowsill and hid under the bed. It turned out to be the director, who, bending over the bed, told the reptile that Reed was missing, then asked her to leave. The lizard obeyed and crawled out to him, and the man thought that, as he had assumed, she understood human speech. The hero of the holy war against the demons extended his hand to the little girl and said that he wanted to distract her for a while so that they could search for Richard together. Without wasting any time, the director threw on his cloak and with lightning speed zigzagged among the trees, jumping from branch to branch. The man asked the lizard that had settled on his shoulder if it could already smell Rid, but it didn't care at all, since it was barely holding on to the cloak with its paws so as not to fly away. Without slowing down his incredible speed, the director said that he probably hadn't gone too far, while the heroine already thought that she would fly off his shoulder. Erin waved her paws, trying to signal the man to stop, thinking that she knew nothing about the smell, but first she had to survive. But he thought she was showing him the right way, and, stopping on a tree overlooking the village, he said he knew he was going there. The war hero said that Reed often went to those places, and told Snake that since she was a lizard, she had a well-developed sense of smell, which made her embarrassed. Having descended to the ground, the director told the little girl that here they would have to separate. Leaving the reptile among the mountains of boxes, he suggested that she explore the surroundings while he explored the village, because it was much more dangerous there. The director gave the lizard his fist to sniff and said that if it found Richard before him, it would find him by smell. Then the man handed the reptile a handkerchief with the scent of Reed. But Aaron thought about the fact that she was not a dog, and lizards did not know how to track. But the next moment, something happened that refuted the girl's thoughts. She saw a path from the smell of Reed that led to the village. The war hero, pulling his hood over himself, reminded the lizard to be careful, especially near the walls, and said goodbye to her. Aaron sighed, because she didn't know if she would be able to find her master. But since she was overcome with anxiety, she needed to find him as soon as possible. Time flew by very quickly, and a bright moon already appeared in the blue sky. The protagonist, who had been searching for Richard all this time, suddenly realized that he was somewhere nearby. As soon as the girl raised her eyes, she saw a young magician, who was swinging alone on a swing and quietly sobbing. The protagonist climbed onto his shoulder, and the tearful boy, feeling that someone was crawling on him, tensed up and looked to see what was going on. Richard was very surprised when he saw Snake on his shoulder, who barked at him smilingly. The wizard, wiping away his tears, asked the lizard if she had come to find him, and she yapped again. The young man told the reptile that it must have been hard for her to get here with her little paws. Aaron, remembering how she got here on the director's shoulder, thought that she came here by putting her life on the line. Richard apologized and said that something had really pissed him off today. Some idiots were making fun of him, so he put them on their backs. The heroine immediately imagined this picture and remembered that Reed eventually created the first batch of experimental samples. The kid admitted that he was especially disgusted by that little brat Ash, who boasted that he was adopted and that new parents would soon come for him. But suddenly, the boy shouted that he did not envy him at all, because he lived well without his parents, which made Aaron embarrassed, because she had not said anything. However, Richard, looking at the family who came out of the house into the street, said that he still thinks about it sometimes. Looking at the friendly family, the boy wondered why his parents abandoned him, and what they didn't like about him that they abandoned him at such an early age. The youth said that it was then that he learned that ordinary people like this family avoided magicians. Richard, clenching his fists, muttered that it would have been better if they had gotten rid of him when he was a newborn, because then it would have been much better. The protagonist recalls that, according to the novel, Charney and Richard will meet just before coming of age, and then the latter will learn that he is in fact the lost youngest son of the Collin family. And then the thought came to Erin's mind that, compared to living a life full of anger like she was now, wouldn't it be better to find Ritu a family and become more calm? The protagonist believes that this will be a better life for both Charney and Richard. Suddenly, the lizard moved to its owner's lap and, waving its paws, wanted to tell him not to worry too much, but in reality, it only yapped. The snake wanted to convey to Ritu that she would find his family and that she had not abandoned him, but they simply had some circumstances. Waving her paw in the other direction, Erin wanted to suggest that he first go back, since Albion had already searched for him. But Richard, of course, did not understand anything that the girl in the lizard's body wanted to convey to him, which made her upset. However, the boy smiled happily and thanked Snake for her support, because she had specifically found him and even listened to his story. Gently stroking the reptile, the boy said that she was much better than people, because she was very kind. At that moment, Erin froze for some reason with her mouth open, and then froze. It turned out that the little girl just wanted to sneeze, which made the wizard shudder in fear. Richard excitedly asked the little animal if she had caught a cold, deciding to return as soon as possible. But she simply had an itchy nose. Just as the little boy was about to head home, the lizard grabbed his collar with its mouth and pointed its paw in the other direction, hinting that they needed to go there. The young wizard obeyed her. The boy with the reptile on his shoulder followed this path, passing by closed shop windows. Walking along a crowded street lit by lanterns, the main character reflected on the fact that she sometimes thinks about the same things that Richard does. While they were walking around the city, the director asked a local grandmother if she had seen Rid, showing her his portrait. But then the grandmother pointed behind the man, and the man turned around in bewilderment. It turned out to be the lost Richard, and the director, as soon as he saw him, immediately rushed towards him. The war hero crashed into the baby's arms, while Erin watched from the sidelines, and thought that she too had thought that it would have been better if she had been disposed of immediately after birth, and then it would have been better for everyone. Erin watched with a sincere smile as the director hugged the boy he had been so worried about all day. Richard did not try to break free from the embrace, although he looked away in embarrassment. Soon the children returned to the orphanage, where the young wizard immediately went to bed, and the snake settled on the windowsill, again admiring the night landscape. Then the director entered the room and, seeing the lizard by the window, was surprised that it was still not sleeping. The man sat down next to the boy's bed, telling Erin that she must be an owl lizard, even though she just couldn't sleep. Admiring the sleeping magician, the war hero thanked the reptile, because with her appearance in his life, he became much brighter. The knight said that Reed, of course, seems strong on the outside, but in reality, he is just a small child, suffering from loneliness. And just because he is a child mage, he is constantly surrounded by suffering and contempt, so he closed the doors to his heart. The director said that this was, of course, his personal opinion, but he did not think that Richard's parents simply abandoned him. The man had a gift in his hands, wrapped in paper, decorated with leaves, feathers, and a note. He said that he had been trying to find his parents all the time, but to no avail. The lizard simply watched the man who asked her to take care of Richard, because maybe she could fill his emptiness. As he was about to leave the room, Albion admitted that although he had released a large number of children here, they still remained a mystery to him. But the protagonist thought that at that moment, if only she could speak, she would try to support him somehow. Erin climbed up to the sleeping Ritu on the bed and lay down on the pillow opposite him. Watching the boy, the heroine thought that he looked like an angel when he was sleeping, although it was not surprising, because all children have this feature. Suddenly, Erin felt discomfort on her back, where 2 spikes had appeared. The lizard's back itched madly, and she wondered what had popped up on her back, because it had been itching so much all the time lately. The lizard became sad, because she wanted to return to her human form as soon as possible. She hoped to be in her body tomorrow. This night was completely ordinary, except that the moon was unusually bright and dazzlingly sparkling. The day came, and Reed, tapping his crutches, barely made it up the stairs to his room, indignant that the director had loaded him with several hours of training because he had missed it yesterday. Throwing down his crutches, the boy shouted that as soon as he grew up, his legs would no longer be here. However, having calmed his anger, he opened the doors of his room and joyfully shouted to the snake that he had already arrived and would soon bring her some fruit. Then the boy saw a girl with pink hair standing in front of him with her back to him. The beautiful little girl turned to him and stared at him with her big yellow eyes. Richard also stared at her in bewilderment, not understanding where a person had come from in his room. But then he, angrily pointing at the girl, asked who she was and where she came from in his room. But she, waving her hands, asked him to listen first. The young magician shouted angrily that if she had come here by mistake, then she should get lost. But she only raised her hands, one of which held a lizard skin. The protagonist fell silent, and Richard froze when he saw what she was holding in her hand. Deciding that Iron had killed his pet, Rid, armed with magic, gritted his teeth and asked her what she had done with Snake. But then he remembered the director's words when the boy was also going to use magic. It's dangerous. His interlocutor could die. But suddenly, Richard relaxed his palm, as if he had changed his mind about attacking, and the fragments of snow magic sadly fell to the floor. The unsuspecting director, climbing the stairs, heard the screams of Reed, who was ordering someone to immediately give him the snake and leave. Looking into the room, he saw a magician yelling at a pink-haired girl, threatening to harm her if she did not leave. Albion asked what was going on, and he, with emotions boiling inside, explained that there was some strange girl in his room who was talking nonsense about how she was actually Snake. The man looked at the pink-haired stranger, who lowered her head with a sad face. But the director noticed another detail. A large pink tail was dangling near the baby's feet, which is why he immediately assumed that she was a lizard man. After some time, Albion, having discussed everything with Aaron at the table, summed up that she was a lizard man who was 5 years old and had no parents. The man asked if he had understood everything correctly, to which the girl, who was sitting opposite him with her head down, said that she had. Reed asked in surprise if this girl was really Snake, to which the director said that it was, and that people like her are called half-humans. The man said that lizard men usually live in tropical regions, so there is no need for them to come here, and he himself met them for the first time. Meanwhile, a tense Aaron thought about the fact that she definitely made a wish last night, but to turn back, which came true. But it seems to her that it would have been better to at least give some warning about the transformation, because she woke up in bed completely naked. The director, having apologized to the girl in advance, decided to clarify something with her and asked if she had lost her parents or anyone else. The little girl shuddered at that moment, because she remembered Erno, how he looked at her terrifyingly when he saw her in the body of a lizard. Albion, seeing the fear in the girl's eyes, said that she didn't have to talk. The man clenched his trembling hand into a fist and said that half-humans could only grow up surrounded by parents, and he didn't understand who dared to abandon her like that. Still, he sighed and told Aaron that she would live here with Richard for a while. The director then hinted to the little girl that they would need to find a way to deal with her tail, which was constantly wagging like a dog's. The heroine sheepishly apologized for this and said that she wanted to hide it under her skirt, but it would not fit. The director said that he was not scolding her and she had nothing to apologize for. Albion stood up and said that he needed to go to the capital, and there he would find out information about the half-humans. The girl asked him again if he really needed to go to the capital, and he, leaving the room, said that he did, and that he needed to settle some business there. The main character just remembered that Colin's family lives in the capital. In other words, the girl realized that in this way she would be able to find Richard's parents. Lost in her thoughts, the girl stared at Rid, who thought he had something on his face. As it turned out, the box that the director gave the young magician before going to bed contained a bunch of candies and a large lollipop, presenting the protagonist with a box filled with various things including crystals, stones, animal skeletons, fruits, and rocks. Rid said that it was a special box containing jewels that he had collected. The girl looked at it in surprise and asked if he had really collected it himself, to which he replied that he had. Sitting in a clearing under a tree, the boy told his friend that when you walk in the surrounding mountains, you just want to pick up everything that looks beautiful. Among the harmless shells, red autumn leaves and acorns, the young magician showed the dried corpse of a centipede with a smile, causing it to scream. Closing her eyes in horror, the protagonist asked why he would pick something like that, to which he asked if there was nothing geometric or surprising about her. The little girl screamed that it was not at all, and her scream echoed throughout the forest that was located in the vicinity of the orphanage. 3 days passed unnoticed since Iron became human, and Richard said that he had a special secret place in this forest, where he brought her. The heroine was stunned for a second when she realized that his very secret was the corpse of a centipede, but then Richard decided to show his friend a small blue stone, which she looked at with interest. The boy said that he had picked it up yesterday. Aaron immediately realized that this was the same magic stone that Erno wore on himself in the form of an earring. Reed, seeing the interest with which the girl was looking at his find, asked her if she liked it, calling her Snake out of habit, and she said yes. The protagonist told the young mage that her name was actually Erin, but he said that he knew. The boy, examining the stone from all sides, reminded the heroine that when he saved her, he called her Snake, so that is what she is now called. The lizard girl, without taking her eyes off the stone, said that it would still be better if he called her by her real name. Suddenly, Rid asked his girlfriend if he should give her this crystal, to which she asked in surprise if he was serious. He said that before giving something, he must receive something in return. He asked his friend what she could give him, and she instantly remembered her goal of finding his parents when she was still in the body of a lizard. The girl confidently promised that in exchange for this stone, she would take it to the capital. Not even 100 years had passed since Reed indifferently said that he did not want to. She was dejected by his categorical answer. Lying down on the grass, the boy objected that the capital stunk. There were a lot of people, and his head was spinning. But the heroine tried to convince him, saying that there were a lot of sweets there, and that there was also an unexpected gift waiting for him there, which he could not even imagine. Richard asked curiously what gift she was talking about, but she said that it was a secret, but he would definitely be surprised when he saw it. The young wizard asked if this was really something amazing, to which she nodded her head affirmatively. Aaron smiled happily when Richard, after some thought, said that he agreed. Suddenly, he approached the girl's face and said that if he couldn't get to the capital or didn't like the gift, then she would stay with him forever. The young man added that since they were both single, they would become family to each other, after which he asked the protagonist to promise this to him. The little girl lowered her head at first and remained silent, only frowning thoughtfully, but she still agreed to the condition, and, having secured the oath with Richard on her little fingers, repeated that in that case, she promised to stay with him forever. The heroine, presenting Rithu with her escape plan to the capital, drawn on paper, says that tomorrow morning the director will get into a carriage and leave there. But before that, he will introduce his students to their new teacher. The girl showed the corresponding drawing. The protagonist then said that they would take advantage of the moment until the groom was near the carriage and hide right under the coachman's bench. Aaron said that they would try not to get caught, and if they made it to the end, they would arrive in the capital without the director knowing. The little girl asked him what his plan was, to which he again said that it was reckless. The boy told his friend that she knew the director's character and that he would never have let them in, then asked what she would do if they were caught. But she said sheepishly that everything would be fine. They just needed to hide well, although it would be a little stuffy. But then the girl herself began to wonder whether everything would be okay, since it would take a whole week to get there. The young wizard looked indifferently at his friend, who, no longer so confidently, said that it would probably be difficult for them. In fact, Erin has another, real goal. After she takes Richard to the Dukes of Colin to discreetly give Erno the shard and withdraw the money she received from the bank. The little girl thought that all these plans could only be realized in the capital, and there must be some other way. The young magician, looking at Iron's latest drawing, asked if she really wanted to go to the capital. She said that she really wanted to, because if they went there with him, it would be a lot of fun, just like in her drawing. And at the same time, she would fulfill her promise. Looking at the drawing, Richard said without much interest that he agreed to try. The girl asked if he really didn't mind, to which he, getting to his feet, reminded his girlfriend that she had promised him yesterday that they were a family. He extended his hand to the heroine and told Snake that they would do everything together. The girl smiled at him and swore that they would definitely go to the capital together. The next day, the escape plan was put into action. The director was just getting ready to leave, and up until that moment, everything had been going smoothly for the two friends. As soon as Aaron and Richard hid under the stableman's bench, they were immediately overcome with embarrassment, because it was incredibly cramped there, which the lizard was not prepared for. She expected that two people could fit in there by simply tucking their legs in, but in reality, it turned out to be very cramped, and they had to play Tetris to fit. Rid, overcoming his awkwardness, wanted to ask her something, and she raised an interested look at him. Getting ahead of her friend, she tenderly asked him if it was too crowded. Richard's face immediately turned red, and he, stumbling over every word, said that it was nothing like that. Suddenly, the girl heard the driver's signal that the carriage was already leaving, after which the wheels moved, but the road beneath them was not so smooth. As soon as the carriage moved, the protagonist immediately began to shake, as if an earthquake were happening. The coachman, as if nothing had happened, asked his passenger if he had a cigarette, to which he said no. The carriage had only just started moving, but thanks to how uncomfortable it was and how much she was seasick, the heroine realized that they were in complete trouble. But the groom, as usual, was driving the horse, and the unsuspecting director was watching the road. Meanwhile, the palace of the Edom clan was darkened by clouds and a dreary pouring rain. Charney was giving Erno a therapy session for his rage, but he didn't react to it at all, but seemed to be lost in his thoughts. The girl thought that this was very strange, because usually she could calm down people from the Edom clan in 10 minutes, but the young master was still uneasy. Suddenly, His Highness pulls his hand out of the little girl's hands, ordering her to stop. The young lady said that the purification was not yet finished, but he, beginning to leave, said that he did not need more, as they were wasting their time. He told Charna that she could go to her room. The gentleman left the room, slamming the door, and the main character of the novel was left alone. Erno walked down the corridor, holding his head, but then he was met by his sons, who had been looking for him for a long time and greeted him. The boys ran after their father, and he asked if there was any news about Iron. Cillian said that they received reports every day, but there was still no progress, although the servants promised to find her as soon as possible. Erno said that they themselves were creating a reason for him to break free from the leash, but his son asked him to be patient, because Aaron would not like such a father. The man asked how things were with the bank, to which Callan reported that it took a little pressure to get them to start working together. The kid was afraid to tell his dad that they had promised to let him know when they got access to her account, but he said with a grin that if they wanted to live, they would tell him. Suddenly, Erno shuddered and froze, staring at the entrance to the room where Aaron used to live. The two boys did the same. Just a few days ago, this little girl with a sunny smile, rubbing her sleepy eyes, asked her daddy how he slept and wished him a good morning. But now there was silence in this room. The bedroom was immersed in sad gray tones. Sitting down on the bed, Erno thought about how it really had been just a joke at first. He felt only curiosity and interest towards the girl, connected with the sensations he received from the ring that she returned to him then in the library. Just then, the man began to get tired of the boring toys and wanted to enjoy a fun show called Loving Daddy and the Sweet Daughter Who Loves Him. And when he got bored with it, he would throw Aaron out at any moment, and only ruins would remain from this performance. However, he did not do this, because at the very moment when the girl was able to calm his fury, he began to become attached to her. From a distant relative, who aroused only curiosity, the heroine became his daughter, whom he began to truly value. Callan worriedly asked his father if everything was okay, and asked why he had been silent for so long, and if there was any problem. But then the brothers' eyes widened when Dad told them that he needed to go somewhere, so he asked them to cancel all his plans for today. Confused, Cillian reminded his father that he had a private meeting with Duke Duncan, to which he indifferently asked him to say that he was not there. The son objected that he had also canceled the last time, although the Duke had been making arrangements with him for a month because he wanted to meet, but Erno did not react in any way. Aritiam, walking along the corridor, thought hard about what it was that Aaron didn't like so much that she left her home, where she had everything. The man assumed that he had not been sincere enough, or that she was hiding because there was some misunderstanding between them. Hiding his face with his hand, the gentleman wondered if she was okay at all, and where his daughter was, whom he missed so much. Meanwhile, things are going very interestingly for Aaron. The director has discovered them and started scolding them, wondering if they have accidentally gone crazy. The irritated man explained to the children that it would take a whole week to get to the capital, and they were going to spend the entire time under the bench. Albion asked the boys if they even knew what they had done, and said it was good that they had stopped and checked everything. He said he would call a carriage from the nearest village to take them back. The girls said that they had important business in the capital and asked the director to allow them to go too, but he said no. He explained that the capital was too dangerous for small children, and although the main streets were safe during the day, at night criminals lurked in the dark corners. But desperate Aaron told Albion that the thing is that she really has important business there. She absolutely needs to get there. But the director sternly repeated that it was too dangerous for them there, and if she said what the matter was, he would do it for her. The young magician, noticing how the little girl was trying to get permission, told the director that she had promised him to go to the capital together. But suddenly, the girl showed the man a blue stone and said that it was all because of him. She must pass on this treasure to the Etam family. Richard, hearing this, stared in surprise and wondered why she was talking about the Etams. The main character told the director that she had connections in the Etam family, and she needed to go there in person so that they could accept the stone. The director asked if she really had connections in this family, to which she sheepishly said that she had accidentally contacted them before coming here. The little girl apologized for making him worry, but said that it was a very important thing for the Etam clan, without which they were in danger. The director wondered who this little girl was, and how she knew about the danger of the Etams, but the groom asked him to hurry because it was time to go. He asked him to wait, because they had not finished the conversation yet. Meanwhile, Aaron again asked him to leave them. The excited snake told the director that they would sit quietly and obey him, but asked only to be allowed to go with him. Suddenly, Albion stared at the child in fear, as if he had a sense of déjà vu. However, the director softened and told the boys to sit down quickly, promising to discuss the details later. The protagonist was overjoyed by this and hurried after him, but suddenly noticed that Rid was still standing in the same place. The girl called out to him in bewilderment and saw that he lowered his gaze and pursed his lips. But here, nothing remained of the boy's mysteriousness, and he told Snake with admiration that she was adapting to the circumstances perfectly. The young magician added that he never thought he would come up with such a plausible story about yesterday's stone. The boy laughed and said that for a second he believed in her, but the heroine tried to explain to him that she had not made anything up. Richard grabbed his friend by the hand and led her to the cart, cheerfully saying that they needed to get to the village for dinner as quickly as possible. Aaron decided to keep quiet about the truth she wanted to tell him, and simply smiled. But then she realized that the situation reminded her of Jenga. It was as if it was built from lies that would soon be revealed, and everything would go awry. The carriage with the director, Richard and Aaron set off for the capital, stopping at the nearest village. The protagonist doesn't know when everything will collapse, because the more time passes, the more risky it becomes. Her Jenga is like a time bomb. Soon the travelers stopped at a hotel, where Rid could not stop marveling at how luxurious everything was. It was as if everything was made of marble. But Albion asked him not to look around and to follow him, but the boy did not stop. He enthusiastically told his friend that there was an elevator that worked with the help of floating stones, which surprised her very much. The wizard then noticed the very soft floor in the corridor and asked if it was made of cloud, but the director asked him to calm down. The guy climbed onto the table and told Aaron that someone had left some sweets, so he asked if he could eat them, to which she said they were just treats. Richard had already pulled all the desserts to his mouth, telling his friend how cool it was, but she wondered why he had asked permission if he was going to eat them anyway. But then the director turned to the children and asked them to listen to him carefully. They silently raised their eyes to him. The man told the boys that from that moment on, he would go about his business in the capital and would come for them in 4 nights, asking them not to leave under any circumstances. Taking the strange medallion in his hands, he added that if something happens here or they want to ask about something, they will contact through this transmitter. Rid chewed candy and listened together with Snake, to whom the director said about her stone. As soon as he finished with his business, they would discuss it in more detail. Albion clapped his hands, after which he suggested that the children all have dinner and then put away all their things and get ready for bed, to which the children agreed. Night fell, and Iron and Richard went to bed. The former was already dreaming, perhaps, his fourth dream. Albion, who was already about to set off, took one last look at the children to make sure they were okay. After that, he left the hotel and headed down the street to the capital, but he was haunted by the thought of whether he had done the right thing in taking them with him. An old memory surfaced in the man's mind, how his daughter, who looked very much like Aaron, had also desperately asked him to take her with him to the capital. On the director's desk, there is a touching photo of him, his wife and daughter smiling sweetly. The man realized that he was already tired of these regrets. The main character lists everything she needs to take with her: a box of sweets, a transmitter, a ball for emergencies, a cloak, and a letter with a message. The lizard man was going to infiltrate the capital alone, and she was preparing for it. The most important thing for her was money, 30,000 losts. The girl thinks that this should be enough to get to the goal, but she feels that she will be found immediately as soon as she withdraws money from the bank. She glanced out of the corner of her eye at the bed and noticed that Richard was sleeping as if nothing had happened. The little girl remembers his promise that if he doesn't like the gift, or can't get to the capital, she will stay with him forever. This made her wary, but, having pulled the hood over herself, she realized that Rid was still a small child. He did not yet fully understand what he was saying, and he simply had no one else to become attached to. The girl quietly creaked the door as she left the room. She left a note on the table for Richard just in case, although she didn't like leaving so secretly. Erin tried to console herself with the thought that he would be happy to hear about his parents. She stopped to check if her tail was visible under her skirt. The girl went out into the world, mentally apologizing to Albion and Rid. She is sure that she will be able to return, because even though she is 5 years old, her consciousness is adult. But the heroic thought was interrupted by the unexpected roar of a whale, which came from Iron's belly. A moment later, the doorbell of the store rang, and the saleswoman wished the little girl to come again. Having bought herself a snack, the protagonist, with the same self-confidence, promised that she would first have breakfast before that. Walking down the street and chewing bread, the lizard was surprised at how tasty it was, and was happy that now she knew what it tasted like in this world. But the young lady was upset that she had to spend 6,000 losts on this snack. She believes that the rest will work out somehow. However, the little girl noticed something else. There were a lot of different people in the capital, so she decided to walk very carefully. The girl looked around, because first she needed to find a private carriage with a free seat. She decided that if she didn't have enough money for the trip, she would just get out somewhere halfway. Suddenly, Snake clearly heard someone's stomach growling from hunger next to her. Turning her head, the main character saw a young boy in a cloak, who was sitting alone in an alley and no one was paying attention to him. When Erin saw this child, she thought that he was a little older than Richard, but already outside, and seemed to be very hungry. Suddenly, the young man noticed that a stranger had approached him, handed him a treat, and asked if he wanted to try it. A cute little girl with pink hair told the boy that it was a bun with strawberry jam, and said that she was giving it to him. Noticing that the homeless man was simply silent, the girl looked away in embarrassment and said that if he didn't like strawberry, she also had tea-flavored ones. The little girl offered to give him something else, but then she noticed that the boy's hood had fallen off his head. The protagonist was bewildered when she saw the stranger's snow-white hair. The handsome man with blue eyes looked at the girl with surprised eyes, and Erin immediately understood what was going on. At this moment, the main character remembered a concept from The Illusion of Adoption. She is not rich in describing the appearance of secondary extras like her. The author selects objects precisely and concentrates on them, as with Erno, for example. The main characters receive the most beautiful descriptions of appearance, but the descriptions of the appearance of disposable extras, like our protagonist, what they are and what they are not, is unclear. In this case, the boy, with his flower-like beautiful appearance, makes it clear to Iron that he is far from secondary, but one of the main characters of the novel. The girl immediately started running, because since he is one of the key characters, he is somehow connected with Sharn, which means the Etams can quickly find her. However, the little girl does not want to have any more contact with them, but wants to start living peacefully in an orphanage as soon as possible. Moving away from the boy, the traveler thinks that he will soon meet Sharn and find salvation, and it is time for an extra like her to leave the stage. The blonde youth looked after the girl with bewilderment, then lowered his gaze to her treat. But suddenly he smiled and, turning to the only god of the empire, Arm, said that it seemed a miracle had happened. Meanwhile, the head of the Etam clan was busy filling out paperwork in his office. The old man turned to the chief butler, who was standing nearby, and asked if there was any news, to which he replied that they were spending all their efforts on this. But there was nothing. His lordship, calling the traitorous maid a scoundrel, said that if only she had not blackened the good name of Fluffy, then everything would have been fine. Kylo said that was certainly true, but it wasn't his fault either. Grandpa winced angrily and asked what he had done. The gentleman angrily reminded the butler that he had not become like this since yesterday, and that other children of the Etam family were growing up in the same conditions. The head of the clan said that in his time, fists were used first, and only then talk. Kylo told the man that he understood his feelings too. He, like last time, treated the girl in such a way as to raise her strong. But the butler added that she loved him very much and obeyed him, because her fear and shock were very great, and wounds received at such a young age do not heal so easily. The old man fell silent and looked away, because his subordinate's words made him think. He promised to sort it out, and then asked how the blockhead was doing. The butler immediately realized that he meant Erno. Kylo reported that he had a meeting with Marquis Fleur today and left, saying that he had some business outside. It seemed that the head of the family continued to write calmly, saying that yesterday Erno had cancelled a meeting with Duke Marie, presenting the protagonist with a box filled with various things, including crystals, but suddenly the old animal skeletons, clenched in rage, rocks, broke the pen said as that it was a special box containing that jewels that he had collected. Meetings for the third day in a row, at it in surprise, the hysterical and asked cry if he had really collected it himself was heard throughout the palace. To which he replied that he had, outraged that this scoundrel had decided to torture the entire family. That when you walk in the surrounding mountains, walking along you just want to pick up everything that looks beautiful, which was surrounded by cawing crows. Among the harmless shells, the birds took off into the sky, acorns, dropping black feathers onto the ground. The dried corpse of a centipede prepared to enter a certain establishment, scream. First, closing her eyes in horror, from the guard. The protagonist asked to find a broad-shouldered bearded man, who asked him with a grin if there was nothing geometric or surprising about her. But then the little bartender said that he understood why he came, and her scream echoed throughout the forest, the burden that was located the head of the vicinity of the orphanage, and came for a task 3 days mercenary. Passed unnoticed, but Albion taking off his hood, and Richard said that he had a special secret place presenting in this forest, the protagonist where he brought her, filled with various things, including crystals, when she realized that his very animal skeleton was the corpse of a centipede. But then Richard decided to show his friend containing jewels that he had collected, which she looked at with interest in surprise. The boy said that he had really collected it himself. Aaron to which he replied that he had, that this was the same magic under a tree. Erno wore on himself. The boy told his friend in the form that when you walk in the surrounding mountains, seeing the interest with which the girl was looking at his find, among the harmless shells, calling her snake out of acorns, and she said yes. The young magician showed the protagonist told the young maid with a smile that her name was actually Aaron. But he said that he eyes knew. In horror, the boy, the protagonist, asked the stone why he would pick something like that. Reminded the heroine to which he asked when he if there was nothing geometric or surprising about her. So that is what she is now called. The little girl screamed that it was not at all, without taking her eyes off the stone. Throughout the forest, said that it was located in the vicinity of the orphanage by her real name. 3 days suddenly, unnoticed since his girlfriend became human, if he should give her this crystal. And Richard said that he had a special secret place in this forest if he was serious, where he brought her. He said that before giving for a second, he must when she realized that his very secret he asked his friend what she could give him. But then Richard decided to show his friend a small blue stone when she was still in the body of a lizard. The girl confidently promised that in exchange for this stone, immediately she would take it to the capital. That this was the same magic stone that Erno wore on himself, in the form of an earring that he did not want to. Seeing the interest with which the girl was looking at his categorical answer, asked her lying down on the grass, calling her snake out of habit, and she said yes. There were a lot of people, and his head was spinning. But her name was actually but the heroine Aaron tried to convince him, but he said that he knew, saying that there were a lot of sweets there, examining the stone and that there was also an unexpected reminded gift the heroine for him that when he saved her, which he could not even imagine. So Richard that is what she is now called. What gift she was talking about, without taking her eyes off the stone. But she said that it was a secret. said that it would definitely be surprised when he called her by her real name. The young wizard asked if this was really something amazing, if he should give her this crystal. She nodded her head affirmatively. To which she asked in surprise if he was serious. When Richard, after some thought, before giving something, he agreed. He must receive something in return. He approached the girl's face. He asked his friend and said that if he couldn't get to the capital, she instantly remembered her goal of finding his parents, then she would stay with him forever. Still in the body of a lizard. The young man added that the girl confidently promised that in exchange for this stone, to each other, she would take it to the capital. He asked the protagonist 100 years had passed to him since Reed, the little girl lowered her head at first that he did not want to, and remained silent. She was dejected by his categorical answer, but she still agreed to the condition. Lying down on the grass, and having secured the oath with Richard on her little fingers, there were a lot of people that in that case, his head was spinning. She promised to stay with him forever. Tried to convince him. The heroine, saying that there were a lot of sweet escape plan to the capital, and that there was also drawn on unexpected gift waiting for him there. Tomorrow morning, the director will get into a carriage. Richard asked curiously what gift she was talking about, introduce his students, but she said that it was a secret. The girl showed the corresponding surprised when he saw it. The protagonist, the young wizard, asked that they would take advantage of the moment amazing until the groom was near the carriage affirmatively and hide right under the coachman's bench. When Richard, said that they would try not to get caught, said that he agreed, and if they made it to the end, they would arrive in the capital without the director knowing. Get to the capital, the little girl or didn't like what his plan was, then she would stay with him forever. That it was reckless. The young man added, the boy told his friend that she knew the director's character, they would become family to each other, and that he would never have let them in. After which he asked the protagonist what she would do if they were caught. The little girl lowered her head at first, that everything would be fine. Silent. They just needed to hide thoughtfully, although it would be a little to the condition. But then the girl herself began to wonder Richard whether everything would be okay. Repeated that in that case, a whole week she promised to stay with him forever. The young wizard looked indifferently at his friend, presenting Ridu, who with her escape no longer so confidently drawn on paper, said that it would probably be difficult for them. Morning, the director will get into a carriage and leave there. But after before she takes Richard, he will introduce his students to their new teacher. Give Erno the shard. The girl showed and withdraw the money she received from the bank. The protagonist, the little girl, thought they would take advantage of the moment could only be realized until the groom was near the carriage, and there must be some other way under the coachman's bench. The young magician, Aaron, looking at Iron's latest drawing, caught, asked if they made it to the end, they would arrive in the capital. She said that she without the director knowing, because if they went there with him, what his plan was, it would be a lot of fun. To which he again said that it was reckless. And at the same time, she would fulfill the director's character, looking at the drawing, and that he would never have let without much interest. Then he agreed what she would do if they were caught. The girl asked if he really didn't mind, that everything would be fine. Getting to his feet, they just needed to hide well. His girlfriend, although it would be a little stuffy, yesterday that they were a family. But then the girl herself began to wonder whether everything would be okay, and told Snake that they would do everything together to get there. The girl smiled at him, wizard looked indifferently at his friend, definitely go to the capital together so confidently. The next day, said that it would probably be difficult for them. In fact, the director was just getting ready to leave. Real goal, and up until that moment, takes Richard everything had been going smoothly for the two friends. Give Erno the shard, Aaron and Richard withdraw the money under the stableman's bench. The little girl immediately that all these plans could only be realized because it was incredibly cramped, and there must be some other way. The wizard was not prepared for. The young magician, looking at Iron's latest drawing, could fit in there, asked if she really wanted to go to the capital, but in reality, she said that she really wanted to be very cramped because if they went there with him, Tetris to fit, it would be a lot of fun. Overcoming his awkwardness, drawing, wanted to ask her something, and she raised an interested look at him. Looking at the drawing, getting ahead of her friend, said without much interest that he agreed to try it. The girl asked if he really didn't mind red, to which he, getting stumbling over every word, reminded his girlfriend said that it was nothing like that. Him yesterday suddenly, that they were a family. The girl heard the driver extended his hand that the carriage was already leaving, and told Snake that they would do everything together. The wheels moved. The girl smiled at him beneath them and swore that they would definitely go to the capital together. The next day, the immediately began to put into action, as if an earthquake were happening. The director was just getting ready to leave, as if nothing had happened. That moment. Everything had been going smoothly for the two friends. As soon as Aaron and Richard, the carriage had only just started moving. They were immediately thanks to how uncomfortable it was, and how much she was incredibly cramped there. The heroine realized the lizard was not prepared for. She expected that two people could fit in there by simply tucking their legs in, and the unsuspecting director was watching the road. It turned out to be very cramped. Meanwhile, the palace of the Edom clan was darkened by clouds, overcoming his awkwardness. Wanted to ask her something, and she raised an interested look at him. But he didn't react to it at all. She tenderly asked him if it was too crowded. The girl thought that this was very strange, because usually she could calm down over every word. The Edom clan said that it was nothing like that. But the young master was still uneasy. The girl heard the driver signal His Highness that the carriage was already leaving. The little girl's hands. After which the wheels moved. Stop. The young lady said that the purification was not yet finished. As soon as the carriage moved, he, beginning to leave, immediately said that he did not need more, as if they were wasting their time. The coachman told Charna that she could go to her room. The gentleman left the room if he had a slamming the door to
and
which
the main
he said
character
no.
of the novel
The carriage
was left
had
alone.
only just started
Erno
moving.
walked down the corridor,
But thanks to how
holding his
uncomfortable
head.
it was,
But then
and
he
how
was
much
met
she
by
was
his
seasick,
sons, who had
the
been looking
heroine
for him
realized
for a
that
long
they were
time
in
and
complete
greeted him.
trouble.
The
But
boys
the
ran
groom,
after
as
their
usual,
father,
was
and he
driving
asked
the
if there was
horse,
any news
and
about
the
Iron.
unsuspecting director
Cillian
was
said that
watching
they
the road.
received reports
Meanwhile,
every day.
the palace of
But there
the
was
Edom
still
clan
no
was
progress,
darkened by
although the
clouds and a
servants
dreary
promised to
pouring
find her
rain.
as soon as
Charnay
possible.
was giving
Erno
Erno a
said
therapy
that they
session for
themselves
his
were
rage,
creating a reason
but
for
he
him
didn't
to
react
break
to
free
it at
from the
all.
leash, but seemed
But
to
his
be
son
lost
asked
in his
him to be
thoughts.
patient.
The girl
Because
thought that
Aaron
this
would
was
not
very
like such a
strange,
father,
because
the man
usually
asked
she could
how
calm
things
down
were with the
people from
bank,
the Edom clan
to which
in 10
Callan
minutes.
reported that it
But
took
the
a
young
little
master
pressure
was
to
still
get them to start
uneasy.
working together.
Suddenly,
The
his
kid
Highness
was
pulled
afraid
his
to tell his
hand out of
dad
the little girl's
that they had
hands,
promised to let him
ordering her
know
to stop.
when they got
The
access
young
to her
lady
account.
said that the
But he
purification
said
was
with
not
a grin
yet finished,
that if they wanted
but
to live,
he,
they
beginning
would
to
tell
leave,
him.
suddenly,
Said that he did not
Erno
need
shuddered
more,
and froze,
as they were wasting
staring
their
at the
time.
entrance to the room
He told
where Aaron
Charna that
used
she
to
could
live.
go to her room.
The two boys
The
did
gentleman
the
left
same.
the room
Just a few
slamming
days
the
ago,
door.
this little
And the
girl
main
with a sunny
character of the
smile
novel was
rubbing
left
her
alone.
sleepy eyes.
Erno walked
asked
down
her
the
daddy
corridor,
how he slept,
holding his head,
and wished him a good morning.
But then he was met
But now
by his
there was
sons,
silence in this
who had
room.
been looking for him
The
for a
bedroom
long
was
time
immersed
and
in
greeted
sad
him.
gray
The
tones.
boys ran after
Sitting
their
down
father,
on the bed,
and he
Erno
asked if
thought
there was
about
any
how it
news
really
about
had been
Iron.
just a joke at
Cillian
first.
said that they received
He felt only
reports every day,
curiosity and interest
but there was still
towards
no
the girl.
progress.
Although
Connected
the
with the
servants promised
sensations
to
he
find her
received
as
from
soon
the
as
ring,
possible,
that she
Erno
returned to
said
him
that they
then in the
themselves were
library.
creating a
Just
reason
then
for
the
him to
man
break
began
free
to
from
get
the
tired
leash.
of the boring toys,
But his son asked
and
him
wanted
to
to
be
enjoy a
patient,
fun show
because
called
Aaron
Loving
would not
Daddy
like
and the
such a
Sweet
father.
Daughter Who
The
Loves
man
Him.
asked
And
how
when he
things
got
were
bored
with the
with
bank,
it, he would
to
throw
which
Aaron
Callan
out at
reported
any moment,
that it took a little
and only
pressure
ruins
to get
would
them to
remain
start
from this
working together.
performance. The kid
However,
was
he
afraid
did
to
not
tell
do
his
that,
dad that they
because
had
at the very
promised to
moment
let
when
him
the girl
know
was
when
able
they
to
got
calm his
access to her
fury,
account.
he began to become
But he
attached
said with
to
a
her.
grin that
From
if
a
they
distant
wanted to
relative
live,
who
they would tell
aroused
him.
only curiosity,
Suddenly,
Erno
the
shuddered
heroine
and
became
froze,
his daughter,
staring at
whom
the
he
entrance
began
to
to
the
truly
room where
value.
Aaron used to live.
Callan worriedly
The two
asked his
boys did
father
the same.
if everything was
Just
okay,
a few days ago,
and asked
this
why
little
he had
girl
been
with a
silent
sunny
for so
smile,
long,
rubbing
and
her
if there was
sleepy
any
eyes,
problem.
asked
But
her
then
daddy
the
how he
brothers' eyes
slept,
widened
and wished
when
him a
Dad
good
told them
morning.
that he needed
But
to
now
go
there was
somewhere.
silence in this
So
room.
he asked them to
The
cancel
bedroom
all
was
his plans
immersed
for
in
today.
sad gray tones.
Confused,
Sitting down on
Cillian
the
reminded
bed,
his father
Erno thought
that he
about
had a
how it
private
really
meeting
had
with
been
Duke
just a
Duncan,
joke at first,
to which he
felt
indifferently
only
asked him to
curiosity
say that
and
he was not
interest
there.
towards the girl.
The son objected
Connected
that
with
he had
the
also
sensations he
canceled the last
received from the
time,
ring,
although
that she
the Duke
returned
had
to
been
him
making
then in the
arrangements with
library
him for a month.
Just then,
because
the
he
man
wanted to
began to
meet.
get tired of the
But
boring
Erno did not
toys
react
and
in any
wanted to
way.
enjoy a fun
Aaron
show
Tam,
called Loving
walking
Daddy
along
and
the
the
corridor,
Sweet Daughter Who
thought
Loves
hard
Him.
about what it
And when he
was
got
that
bored
Aaron
with it,
didn't like
he would
so
throw
much,
Aaron out
that
at
she
any
left her
moment,
home,
and
where
only
she had
ruins would
everything.
remain from this
The man
performance.
assumed that he had
However,
not been
he did not
sincere
do
enough,
this, or that
because
she
at the
was
very
hiding,
moment when the
because
girl
there
was
was
able to
some
calm his
misunderstanding
fury,
between
he
them,
began to become
hiding his
attached
face
to
with
her.
his hand.
From a
The
distant
gentleman
relative
wondered if
who
she was
aroused
okay at
only
all,
curiosity,
and where his
the
daughter
heroine
was,
became his
whom
daughter,
he missed so
whom he
much.
began to truly
Meanwhile,
value.
things are going
Callan
very
worriedly
interestingly
asked his
for
father
Aaron.
if everything
The
was
director
okay,
has discovered
and
them
asked why
and
he had
started
been
scolding
silent
them,
for so long,
wondering
and
if
if
they
they
have
had any
accidentally
problem.
gone crazy.
But then the brothers'
The
eyes
irritated
widened
man
when Dad
explained to the
told them
children
that he needed to
that
go
it would take
somewhere.
a whole week to
So
get
he
to the
asked them
capital,
to cancel all his
and they were
plans
going
for
to
today.
spend the entire time
Confused,
under the bench.
Cillian reminded
Albion
his
asked
father
the boys
that he
if
had
they
a
even
private
knew what
meeting
they
with
had
Duke
done,
Duncan,
and said it was
to
good
which
that
he
they had
indifferently
stopped and
asked him
checked
to say
everything.
that he was not there.
He said he would
The
call
son
a carriage
objected
from the
that he had
nearest
also
village to
canceled
take
the
them
last
back.
time.
The girl
Although
said
the
that
Duke
they
had
had
been
been
making
making
arrangements
arrangements with
in the
him for a
capital,
month, and asked
because
the
he wanted
director
to
to
meet.
allow them to go too.
But Erno did not
But he
react
said
in
no.
any way.
He explained
Tam,
that the capital
walking
was too
along the
dangerous
corridor,
for small
thought
children,
hard about what
and
it
although
was
the
that
main
Aaron
streets
didn't
were
like
safe
so
during the
much,
day,
that she left
at
her
night,
home,
criminals
where she
lurked
had
in the dark
everything.
corners.
The man man assumed
desperate
that he
Iron
had not
told
been
Albion that
sincere
the
enough,
thing is that she
or that
really
she was
has
hiding
important business
because there
there.
was some
She absolutely
misunderstanding
needs to
between
get
them.
there.
Hiding
But the
his
director
face with his
sternly
hand,
repeated
the
that
gentleman
it was too
wondered if she
dangerous
was
for them
okay
at
there.
all.
And
And
if
where
she
his
said what
daughter
the matter
was,
whom he
he would
missed
do
so
it for
much.
her.
Meanwhile,
The young magician,
things are going
noticing
very
how the little
interestingly
girl
for
was
Aaron.
trying to get permission,
The director has
told the
discovered
director
them
that
and
she had
started
promised
scolding
him to
them,
go to the capital
wondering
together.
if they have
But
accidentally
suddenly,
gone
the
crazy.
girl showed the man
The irritated
a blue
man
stone
explained
and
to
said
the
that it
children
was all
that it
because
would
of
take
him.
a whole week to get
She
to the
must
capital,
pass on this
and
treasure
they were going
to
to
the Eastham
spend the
family.
entire time
Richard,
under the bench.
hearing this,
Albion
stared
asked
in
the boys
surprise
if they
and
even
wondered
knew
why
what
she
they
was
had
talking
done,
about the
and
Edams.
said it was good
The
that
main
they had
character
stopped and
told the
checked
director
everything.
that she had
He said
connections
he would
in the
call a
Etam
carriage
family
from the nearest village
and she
to
needed
take
to go
them
there in
back.
person.
The girl
so
said
that
that
they
they
could
had
accept the
important
stone.
business in the
The
capital,
director
and
asked
asked
if
the
she really
director
had
to allow them
connections
to
in
go
this
family.
too.
To
To
which
which
she
she
no.
sheepishly said
He
that she had
explained that the
accidentally
capital was
contacted
too
them
dangerous
before
for
coming
small
here.
children.
The little girl
And although the main
apologized for
streets
making
were
him
safe
worry
during the day,
but said that it
at
was
night,
a very important
criminals
thing
lurked
for
in
the
the dark
Edam clan.
corners,
Without
but
which
desperate
they were
Iron
in
told
danger.
Albion that the
The
thing is
director
that she
wondered
really
who this
has
little girl
important
was
business there,
and how she knew about the
absolutely
danger
needs
of the
to get there.
Etams.
But the director
groom
asked
sternly
him to
repeated
hurry
because
that
it was too
time to
dangerous
go.
for them there.
He asked him to wait,
And if she said what the
because
matter
they had
was,
not finished the
he would do
conversation
it
yet.
for her.
The young
Meanwhile,
magician,
Aaron again
noticing how the little
them.
girl was
The
trying to get
excited
permission,
snake told the director
that they would
that she
sit
had promised
quietly
him
and
to
obey
go to the
him,
capital together,
but asked only to be
suddenly,
allowed to go
the girl
with him.
showed the man
Suddenly,
a blue stone
Albion
and
stared
said
at
that it
the
was
child
all
in fear,
because of him,
as if he had a
she
sense
must
of déjà
pass
vu.
on this treasure
However,
to the
the
Etam
director
family.
softened
Richard,
and told the boys
hearing
to
this,
sit down quickly,
stared in surprise
promising
and wondered
to
why
discuss
she was
the details
talking about
later.
the Etams.
The
The main
protagonist was
character
overjoyed
told
by
the
this
director
and hurried
that
after
she had
him,
connections in the
but suddenly
Etam family,
noticed that Rid
and
was
she
still
needed to go
standing
there
in
in
the same
person
place,
so that
the
they could
girl
accept
called
the
out to him
stone.
in bewilderment
The director
and
asked
saw
if
that
she
he
really
lowered
had
his
connections
gaze
in
and
this
pursed his
family.
lips.
To
But
which
here,
she sheepishly
nothing
said
remained
that
of
she
the
had
boy's
accidentally
mysteriousness,
contacted them
and he
before
told
coming
Snake
here.
with
The
admiration
little girl
that she was
apologized for
adapting
making
to the
him worry,
circumstances
but
perfectly.
said that it was a
The
very
young
important
magician
thing
added
for the Etam
that he
clan,
never thought he would
without
come
which
up with
they were
such
in
a
danger.
plausible story
The director
about
wondered
yesterday's
who this
stone.
little girl was.
The boy laughed
and how she
and
knew
said
about
that
the
for a
danger of the
second he
Etams.
believed in her,
But the groom
but the
asked him to
heroine
hurry
tried to explain
because
to
it was
him
time to
that
go.
she had not made
He asked
anything
him to
up.
wait.
Richard
Because
grabbed
they had
his
not
friend
finished
by
the
the hand
conversation
and led
yet.
her to the cart.
Meanwhile, Aaron
Cheerfully
again
saying
asked him
that
to
they
leave
needed
them.
to get to the
The
village for
excited
dinner
snake told
as
the
quickly
director
as possible,
that they would sit
Aaron
quietly
decided to
and
keep
obey
quiet
him,
about the truth
but
she
asked
wanted
only
to tell
to be
him,
allowed to go
and
with
simply
him.
smiled.
Suddenly,
But then she
Albion
realized
stared
that
at
the
the child in
situation
fear,
reminded her
as
of
if he had a
Jenga.
sense of déjà vu.
It was as if it
However,
was built from
the director
lies that would
softened
soon be
and told the
revealed,
boys to
and
sit
everything
down
would go
quickly,
awry.
promising
The
to
carriage
discuss
with
the
the
details
director,
later.
Richard and
The
Aaron
protagonist
set off
was
for the
overjoyed by
capital,
this, and
stopping
hurried
at the
after
nearest
him.
village.
But
The
suddenly
protagonist
noticed that
doesn't
Rid
know
was
when
still
everything
standing
will
in the same
collapse,
place,
because
the
the
girl
more time
called out to
passes,
him in
the
bewilderment,
more risky it
and
becomes.
saw that he lowered his gaze
Her
and
Jenga
pursed
is like
his lips.
a time bomb.
But here,
Soon the
nothing
travelers
remained of the
stopped at a
boy's
hotel,
mysteriousness,
where Rid
and
could
he
not
told
stop
Snake with
marveling at how
admiration
luxurious
that she was
everything
adapting
was.
to the circumstances
It was as
perfectly.
if everything
The
was
young
made of
magician
marble.
added that he
But
never
Albion
thought
asked
he
him
would
not
come
to
up
look
with such
around
a
and to
plausible
follow him,
story
but
about
the boy did
yesterday's
not
stone.
stop.
The boy
He
laughed and
enthusiastically
said that
told
for a
his friend
second he
that there
believed
was
in
an
her,
elevator
but
that
the
worked with
heroine
the
tried
help
to
of floating
explain to him
stones,
that she had not
which
made
surprised her
anything
very
up.
much.
Richard
The
grabbed
wizard
his
then
friend
noticed
by the
the
hand
very soft
and led
floor
her
in
to
the
the
corridor,
cart, and asked
cheerfully
if it was
saying
made
that
of
they
cloud.
needed to get to the
But the
village for
director
dinner
asked
as
him to
quickly
calm
as
down.
possible.
The guy
Aaron
climbed
decided
onto
to
the
keep
table
quiet about
and
the
told
truth
Aaron
she
that
wanted
someone
to tell
had
him,
left some sweets,
and simply smiled.
so he asked if
But
he
then
could
she
eat them,
realized that the
to which she
situation
said they were
reminded her
just
of
treats.
Jenga.
Richard
It
had
was as
already
if it
pulled
was
all the
built from
desserts to
lies
his
that
mouth,
would soon be
telling his
revealed,
friend how
and
cool
everything
it
would
was.
go awry.
But she
The
wondered why
carriage
he
with
had
the
asked
director,
permission if he
Richard
was
and
going
Aaron
to eat them
set
anyway.
off for the capital,
But then the director
stopping
turned
at
to
the
the
nearest
children
village,
and asked
the
them to listen to
protagonist
him
doesn't know
carefully.
when everything will
They
collapse,
silently raised their
because
eyes
the
to
more
him.
time passes,
The man told
the
the
more
boys
risky
that
it
from that
becomes.
moment on,
Her
he would
Jenga
go
is
about
like a
his
time
business in
bomb.
the capital.
Soon the
And would
travelers
come for
stopped
them
at a
in
hotel,
4 nights,
where Rid could
asking
not
them
stop
not to
marveling
leave
at
under
how
any
luxurious everything
circumstances.
was. Taking the strange
It was as
medallion
if
in his
everything
hands,
was made of marble.
he added that if
But
something
Albion
happens
asked
here,
him not to
or they
look
want to
around
ask
and to
about
follow
something,
him. But the
they will
boy did not
contact
stop.
through this transmitter.
He enthusiastically
Rid chewed
told his
candy
friend
and listened
that there was
together
an
with
elevator
Snake,
that worked
to
with
whom
the
the
help of
director
floating
said about her
stones,
stone,
which surprised her
As
very
soon as he
much.
finished with
The
his
wizard
business,
then noticed
they
the
would
very
discuss it
soft
in
floor
more
in the
detail.
corridor,
Albion
and asked
clapped
if it
his
was made of
hands,
cloud.
after which he
But the
suggested
director
that the
asked him
children
to calm
all have
down.
dinner.
The guy
and then
climbed
put away
onto the
all their
table
things
and told
and
Aaron
get ready
that
for
someone
bed,
had left some
to which
sweets.
the children agreed.
So he asked if he
Night
could
fell,
eat them,
and Iron
to
and
which she
Richard
said
went
they
to
were
bed.
just treats. The
former
Richard
was
had
already
dreaming
pulled all the
perhaps
desserts to
his
his
fourth
mouth,
dream,
telling
his
Albion,
friend how
who
cool
was
it
already
was.
about to set off,
But she wondered why
took
he had
one
asked
last
permission
look at the
if he was
children
going
to
to
make
eat
sure
them
they were
anyway.
okay.
But then
After
the
that,
director
he
turned
left
to the
the hotel
children
and
and
headed
asked
down the
them to
street to
listen
the
to him
capital.
carefully. But he was
They
haunted by the
silently
thought of
raised
whether
their
he
eyes
had
to
done the
him.
right thing
The
in
man
taking
told
them
the
with
boys
him.
that from
An
that
old
moment
memory
on,
surfaced in
he
the
would
man's
go about
mind.
his business in
How
the
his
capital,
daughter, who
who
looked
looked
very
for
much
them
like
in
Aaron,
4 nights,
had also
asking them
desperately
not to
asked
leave
him
under
to take her
any
with her to the
circumstances.
capital.
Making the
director's
strange
desk,
medallion in
there's
his
a
hands,
touching photo of him.
he added that if
his
something
wife and
happens
daughter
here,
smiling
or they want to
sweetly.
ask about something,
The man
they will
realized
contact
that he was
through this
already
transmitter.
tired of these
Rid
regrets.
chewed candy,
The main
and
character
listened
lists
together with
everything
Snake,
she needs to
to
take
whom
with
the
her.
director said
A
about
box
her
of
stone,
sweets,
a transmitter.
as soon as he finished
A ball
with his
for
business,
emergencies.
they would discuss
A
it
cloak
in more detail.
and a letter with a
Albion
message.
clapped his
The
hands.
lizard man was going
After
to
which he
infiltrate the
suggested
capital
that the children
alone,
all have
and she was
dinner,
preparing
and
for
then
it.
put away all their things.
The most
and
important
get ready
thing
for
for
bed.
her was money,
To which the
$30,000
children agreed.
lost.
Night fell.
The girl thinks
and
that
Iron
this
and
should be
Richard
enough
went
to
to
get to
bed.
the goal. The
But
former
she
was
feels
already
that she will be
dreaming,
found
perhaps,
immediately
his fourth
as soon as
dream.
she withdraws
Albion,
money from the bank.
who was already about
She
to set
glanced
off,
out of the corner of
took
her
one
eye
last
at the bed
look at the children
and noticed
to
that
make sure
Richard
they
was
were
sleeping.
okay.
As
After
if
that,
nothing had
he left
happened.
the hotel
The little
and headed
girl
down the
remembers
street to the
promise
capital,
that if he doesn't
but
like
he
the
was
gift,
haunted by the
or
thought of
can't
whether
get to
he
the
had done the
capital,
right thing in
she will
taking them
stay
with
with
him
him
forever.
An old memory
This made her
surfaced in
wary,
the man's mind.
but
Having
how his
pulled
daughter,
the hood over
who looked
herself,
very much like
she
Aaron,
realized that
had
Rid was
also
still a small
desperately
child.
asked him to take her
He
with
did
him
not
to the
yet
capital.
fully understand
On the
what he was
director's
saying.
desk, there is
and
a
he
touching
simply had
photo
no
of
one
him,
else to become
his
attached
wife
to.
and daughter
The girl
smiling
quietly
sweetly.
creaked the door as she
The
left the
man
room.
realized that he was
She
already
left a
tired
note on
of
the
these
table for
regrets.
Richard just in
The
case.
main character lists
Although she didn't
everything
like
she
leaving
needs
so
to take with
secretly.
her.
Aaron
A
tried to
box of
console
sweets,
herself with
a
the
transmitter,
thought that he
a
would be
ball for
happy to hear about
emergencies,
his parents.
a cloak, and
She
a letter
stopped
with
to
a
check if
message.
her tail was
The
visible
lizard
under
man
her
was going
skirt.
to infiltrate
The
the
girl
capital
went out
alone,
into the world,
and she was
preparing
mentally
for it.
apologizing to Albion
The
and
most
Rid.
important thing for her was
She
money.
is sure that she will be able to
30,000
return.
lost.
Because
The girl
even though
thinks
she
that
is
this should
5
be
years
enough
old,
to get to the
her
goal.
consciousness is
But
adult.
she feels that she
But
will
the
be
heroic
found
thought was
immediately
interrupted
as soon as she
by the
withdraws
unexpected
money from
roar
the
of a
bank.
whale.
She
Which
glanced
came
out
from
of the
Iron's
corner of
belly.
her eye at the
A
bed
moment later,
and noticed that
the
Richard
doorbell
was
of the
sleeping,
store rang,
as if nothing
and the
had
saleswoman
happened.
wished
The little girl
girl to
remembers
come
his
again.
promise that if he
Having
doesn't
bought
like the
herself a
gift
snack
or can't
the
get to the
protagonist
capital with the same
she will stay with
self-confidence,
him forever.
promised that
This
she
made
would
her
first
wary,
have breakfast
but
before that.
having pulled the
Walking
hood
down
over
the street
herself
and chewing
she
bread,
realized
the
that
lizard
Rid
was
was
still a small
surprised at how
child.
tasty it was.
He did not yet
and was
fully
happy
understand
that now
what he was
she
saying,
knew what it tasted
and
like
he simply
in this
had
world.
no one else to
But the
become
young lady
attached
was
to.
upset
The
that
girl
she had to
quietly
spend
creaked the door as
6,000
she left the
losts on
room.
this snack.
She
She
left a
believes
note on
that
the
the
table
rest
for
will work
Richard
out
just in
somehow.
case.
However,
Although she didn't
the little
like
girl
leaving so
noticed
secretly,
something else.
Aaron tried to console
There were a
herself
lot of
with
different
the thought
people in the
that he
capital,
would be happy
so
to
she
hear about
decided
his
to walk
parents.
very carefully.
She stopped
The
to
girl
check
looked
if her
around,
tail was visible
because
under her
first
skirt.
she needed to
The
find
girl
a private
went out
carriage
into the
with a
world,
free seat.
mentally
She decided
apologizing
that if
to
she didn't
Albion
have
and
enough
Rid.
money for the trip,
She is
she
sure
would just
that
get
she will
out
be
somewhere
able to
halfway.
return.
Because
Suddenly,
even though she
Snake
is
clearly
5
heard
years
someone's
old,
stomach
her
growling from
consciousness
hunger
is adult.
next to her.
But the
Turning her
heroic
head,
thought was
the main
interrupted
character
by the
saw a young
unexpected
boy in
roar
a
of a
cloak,
whale,
who was sitting
which came
alone
from
in an
Iron's
alley,
belly.
and no one
A
was
moment
paying
later,
attention to him.
the doorbell
When
of the
Aaron
store
saw
rang,
this child,
and the
she
saleswoman
thought that he
wished
was a
the
little
little
older
girl
than
to come
Richard.
again.
But
Having
already
bought
outside,
herself a snack
and seemed to be
the
very
protagonist,
hungry, with the same
suddenly,
self-confidence,
the young man noticed
promised
that a
that she
stranger
would
had
first
approached
have
him,
breakfast before
handed
that,
him a treat,
walking
and
down the
asked if
street
he
and
wanted to
chewing
try
bread.
it.
A
The
cute
lizard
little
was
girl with
surprised
pink
at how
hair
tasty
told the
it
boy
was,
that it was a bun
and was
with
happy
strawberry
that
jam,
now she knew
and
what it
said that
tasted
she was
like
giving
in
it
this
to him.
world.
Noticing
But the young
that the
lady was
homeless man
upset
was simply
that she had to
silent,
spend
the girl
6,000
looked
losts
away
on
in
this
embarrassment
snack,
and
she
said that
believes
if he
that the
didn't
rest
like
will work
strawberry,
out somehow.
she also had
However,
tea-flavored
the
ones.
little girl
The
noticed
little
something
girl
else.
offered to give him something else.
There were a lot of
but then
different
she
people in the
noticed that the
capital,
boy's hood
so
had
she
fallen
decided
off his
to walk
head.
very carefully.
The protagonist was
The girl looked
bewildered
around
when she saw the
because
stranger's
first
snow
she
white
needed to
hair.
find a
The
private
handsome
carriage
man
with a
with
free
blue
seat.
eyes
She
looked at the
decided
girl
that
with
if she didn't
surprised
have
eyes,
enough money for the
and
trip,
Aaron
she
immediately
would just get out
understood
somewhere
what was
halfway.
going on.
At this
Suddenly,
moment,
Snake
the main
clearly heard
character
someone
remembered a
stomach growling
concept
from
from
hunger
the
next to
illusion
her.
of adoption.
Turning her head,
She
the
is
main
not
character
rich in
saw a
describing
young
the
boy in a
appearance
cloak
of secondary
who was sitting
extras
alone
like
in
her.
an alley, and
The
no
author
one was paying
selects
attention to
objects
him.
precisely
When Aaron
and
saw this
concentrates on
child,
them,
she thought
as
that
with
he was a
Erno,
little
for
older
example.
than Richard.
The
But
main
already
characters
outside,
received the
and
most
seemed to be
beautiful
very hungry.
descriptions of appearance.
Suddenly, the young
but the
man
descriptions
noticed
of
that
the
a stranger
appearance
had
of
approached him,
disposable extras,
handed him
like
a
our
treat,
protagonist,
and asked if he wanted
what they
to try
are and
it.
what they are not.
A cute little
is
girl
unclear.
with pink hair
In
told
this
the boy
case,
that it was
the
a
boy,
bun with strawberry
with
jam,
his flower-like
and
beautiful
said that she was
appearance,
giving it to him.
makes it clear
Noticing
to Iron
that the homeless
he is
man
far
was
from
simply
secondary.
silent, but
The
one
girl
of the
looked
main
away in
characters of the
embarrassment
novel
and said
the
that
girl
if he didn't
immediately
like
started
strawberry,
running.
she also
Because
had
since he is one of the
tea-flavored
key
ones.
characters,
The little girl
he is
offered to give
somehow
him
connected
something
with
else.
Sharn.
But then
Which
she
means
noticed
the
that the
Etam's
boy's
can
hood
quickly
had fallen
find
off
her.
his head.
However,
The
the little
protagonist
girl
was
does not want
bewildered
to have
when
any
she saw
more
the
contact
stranger
with
with them,
snow white hair,
but wants to
the
start
handsome
living
man with
peacefully
blue
in an
eyes
orphanage
looked at the
as
girl
soon
with
as
surprised
possible.
eyes.
Moving away
And
from
Aaron
the boy,
immediately
the traveler
understood
thinks
what was
that he
going
will
on.
soon meet
At
Sharn
this moment,
and find
the main
salvation.
character remembered a
And it is
concept
time
from
for an
the
extra
illusion
like
of
her to
adoption.
leave the stage.
She is
The
not
blonde
rich
youth
in
looked after
describing
the
the
girl with
appearance of
bewilderment,
secondary extras
then
like
lowered
her.
his gaze to
The
her
author
treat.
selects
But
objects
suddenly he
precisely
smiled and concentrates
turning
on
to
them,
the only god
as
of the
with
empire,
Erno, for
Arm,
example,
said that it
the
seemed
main
a miracle
characters
had happened.
received the most
Meanwhile,
beautiful descriptions
the head
of
of the
appearance,
Etam clan
but the
was busy
descriptions
filling
of the
out
appearance
paperwork
of
in his
disposable
office.
extras,
The old
like
man
our
turned to the
protagonist,
chief butler,
what they
who was
are and
standing
what they are
nearby,
not, is
and
unclear.
asked if there was
In
any
this
news.
case,
The boy,
to which he replied that
with
they
his
were spending
flower-like
all their
beautiful
efforts on
appearance,
this,
makes
but there
it
was
clear
nothing.
to Iron that
His
he is far
lordship,
from secondary,
calling the traitorous
but one
maid
of the
a
main
scoundrel,
characters of the novel,
said that if
if only
the girl
she had not
immediately
blackened
started
the good
running,
name of Fluffy,
because since he is
then
one of the
everything
key
would have been
characters,
fine.
he is
Kylo
somehow
said that was
connected
certainly
with Sharn,
true, but it
which
wasn't
means
his
the
fault
Etams
either.
can quickly find
Grandpa
her.
winced
However,
angrily
the
and
little
asked
girl
what he
does
had
not
done.
want to have
The
any more
gentleman
contact
angrily
with them,
reminded the butler
but wants to
that
start
he had
living
not become
peacefully
like this
in an
since
orphanage
yesterday,
as soon as
and that
possible.
other children of
Moving
the
away
Etam
from the
family
boy,
were growing
the
up in
traveler
the same
thinks that he will
conditions.
soon meet
The head of
Sharn
the clan
and find
said that in
salvation,
his time,
and it is
fists were
time
used
for
for
an
an
extra like her
and
to
only
leave
then
the
talk.
stage.
Kylo
The blonde
told the
youth
man
looked
that he
after the
understood
girl
his
with feelings
bewilderment,
too,
then
he,
lowered his
like
gaze
last
to
time,
retreat.
treated the
But
girl
suddenly
in such
he
a way
smiled
as to
and,
raise her strong.
turning to the only
But the
god of
butler
the
added
empire,
that she loved him
Arm,
very much,
said that
and
it
obeyed
seemed
him
a miracle had happened.
because her fear and
Meanwhile,
shock were very
the
great.
head of the Etam
And
clan
wounds
was
received at
busy
such a
filling
young
out
age do
paperwork
not
in his
heal
office.
so easily.
The old man
turned
fell
to the chief
silent
butler
and
looked away,
who was standing
because
nearby,
his subordinates'
and
words
asked
made
if
him
there was
think.
any news.
He promised to
To
sort
which
it
he
out,
replied that they
and
were
then
spending
asked how
all
the
their
blockhead
efforts
was
on
doing.
this. But there
The
was
butler
nothing.
immediately
His
realized
lordship,
that he meant
calling
Erno.
the traitorous
Kylo
maid a
reported that
scoundrel,
he had a meeting with
said that
Marquis
if
Fleur
only she
today
had not
and
blackened
left,
the good name
saying
of
that
Fluffy,
he had some business
then
outside.
everything would have been
It
fine.
seemed that the head of
Kylo
the
said
family
that was certainly
continued
true,
to write calmly,
but it wasn't his fault
saying that
either.
yesterday
Erno
Grandpa
had
winced
canceled a
angrily
meeting with
and
Duke
asked
Marie.
what he had done,
And the day
the
before
gentleman
yesterday,
angrily
he
reminded
had
the butler
canceled a
that
conversation
he had not
with
become
Dunoc.
like this
But
since yesterday,
suddenly, the old
and
man's
that other
hand,
children of the
clenched in
Eton
rage,
family were
broke
growing
the
up
pen
in the same
as he whispered
conditions.
through his teeth
The head of the
that
clan
he had been
said that in
canceling
his
meetings
time for the
fists
third day
were
in a
used
row.
first. The
And only
hysterical
then
cry
talk.
of the head
Kylo
of the family
told the man that
was
he
heard
understood
throughout
his
the
feelings
palace.
too.
Outraged
He,
that
like
this
last
scoundrel
time,
had decided
treated
to
the
torture
girl in
the
such a
entire
way as to
family.
raise her
At this
strong.
time,
But
the
the butler
director
was
added that
walking
she
along
loved
a
him very
frightening narrow
much
street
and obeyed him,
which was surrounded
because her
by
fear
fear
and
shock
shock
were very
The
great.
birds took off
And
into the
wounds
sky,
received at such a young
dropping
age
black
do not
feathers
heal
onto
so
the ground.
easily.
The
And
old
Albion
man
prepared
prepared
to
to
enter
enter
a
a
certain
certain
establishment
because his
first
subordinates'
asking
words made him
permission from
think.
the guard.
He promised
He
to
opened
sort
the
it
door
out
to find a
and then asked
broad-shouldered
how the
bearded
blockhead
man
was doing,
who asked him with a
the butler
grin if he had
immediately
come to
realized
enjoy an
that he meant
afternoon
Erno.
drink.
But
Kylo
then the
reported
bartender
that he had a
said that
meeting
he
with
understood
Marquis
why
Fleur
he
today
came and left.
He wanted to
saying
take
that
off
he
the
had some
burden
business
of being the
outside.
head of the family.
It seemed that the
and
head
came
of the
for a
family
task from the
continued to
mercenary.
write calmly,
But Albion,
saying that
taking off his
yesterday
hood,
Erno had
asked him
canceled
not
a
to
meeting
talk
with
nonsense.
Duke Marie.
And the day before yesterday, he had cancelled a conversation with Dunoc. But suddenly, the old man's hand, clenched in rage, broke the pen as he whispered through his teeth that he had been canceling meetings for the third day in a row. The hysterical cry of the head of the family was heard throughout the palace, outraged that this scoundrel had decided to torture the entire family. At this time, the director was walking along a frightening narrow street, which was surrounded by cawing crows. The birds took off into the sky, dropping black feathers onto the ground, and Albion prepared to enter a certain establishment, first asking permission from the guard. He opened the door to find a broad-shouldered, bearded man who asked him with a grin if he had come to enjoy an afternoon drink. But then the bartender said that he understood why he came. He wanted to take off the burden of being the head of the family and came for a task from the mercenary. But Albion, taking off his hood, asked him not to talk nonsense.